Of our members, I would like to call this meeting to order and ask our board analyst to call roll.
Good morning. This is Marcine. Steve Weeks. Are you?
Steve Weeks, public member.
Callie Pham.
Callie Mae Pham, public member, present.
Jackie Crabtree.
Jackie Crabtree, industry member, present.
Derek Matos.
Derek Matos, industry member, present.
Andrew Drapkin.
Andrew Drapkin, public member, present.
Tonya Farley.
Tanya Fairley, industry member, present.
I apologize. And Christy Tran. We have 6 members present, so we have established a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcine. And we now do have a quorum. Before we begin, I just wanted to take just a moment to welcome our new board member, Tanya Fairley. Welcome to the board. The other DCA boards have used a mentor system to help orient new board members. And I thought that was a pretty good idea. So I asked Jackie Crabtree to act as a board mentor to Tanya. Because they share the same licenses. You both have establishment license, you both have cosmetology license. So hopefully that'll be helpful to you in learning how the board operates and the administrative things centered around the board. But obviously it goes without saying, any of us on the board, I'm sure, will be glad to get involved and answer any questions you may have. So welcome, Tanya, and thank you, Jackie, for acting as mentor. And now we can proceed. I wanted to take this opportunity to provide a few details on how this meeting should progress. SB 803 was introduced by Senator Roth as a result of the board's sunset review process. In just a moment, I will turn the meeting over to Sarah Mason, who is consultant for the Senate Business and Professions Committee. The board will then discuss the bill and a motion will be made and seconded. At that time, the board will open the meeting to the public for their comments. So please keep your comments brief and concise, as all comments are limited to 2 minutes. If you're calling today to state your support or opposition of the bill, we encourage you to just state your name and your position on the bill. You will only be allowed to speak once so that everyone can be heard today. And now I would like to turn it over to Sarah Mason.
This is the moderator. I have promoted Sarah Mason up to a panelist. Sarah, can you please unmute your microphone?
Perfect. I think you should be able to. Oh, great. There we go. Thank you so much, moderator. I appreciate that. And good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Weeks, board members, Ms. Underwood. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today about this. And Mr. Weeks and Ms. Underwood want to extend gratitude and appreciation for your participation in the recent Sunset Review oversight hearing that we held in April. The board's input, feedback, and participation in this process is really critical to providing a baseline understanding of the board's work, and what opportunities there are moving forward for changes to the Barbering and Cosmetology Act to reflect the unique needs of the profession and the place that we find ourselves in California. So I'm Sarah Mason. I'm staff to the Senate Committee on Business, Professions, and Economic Development. We are a committee in the California State Senate. We have oversight for a variety of programs within the Department of Consumer Affairs, including the board. I've been with the committee since 2009 and have been working on barbering and cosmetology and a variety of other issues since that time. So appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm briefly just going to touch on the Sunset Review oversight process. You know, it's something that I know the board really took seriously, and we appreciate all of the good work that went into preparing a report to the legislature that the board provided us in 2018. And the board was really patient and provided a really important partnership with the legislature throughout the course of 2019, 2020, and into this year, as the legislature, our committees worked to decide what made sense to have discussions publicly in hearing formats and settings to discuss all of the various pieces about the board's work, the Practice Act, what it makes sense to do moving forward. So SB 803 stems directly from those various hearings and from the Sunset Review oversight process. We held hearings in August of 2019, in November of 2019. Unfortunately, our hearings in 2020 were canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we held a hearing on April 9th of 2021, all of which informed the provisions that are currently in SB 803, as you see. So Senate Bill 803, it's the first step in its life as a bill in the legislative process. The language that you see is open for discussion and ripe for all kinds of conversations. We appreciate the board's partnership in having those conversations and look forward to working together moving forward. So the bill updates the act to reflect changes in the beautification services industry over the past number of years by modernizing the law to better reflect necessary regulation for services that may carry a risk to the consumer and to the licensee providing those. The bill provides our state's personal appearance artists and professionals with flexibility to quickly get to work doing their craft with the appropriate, relevant, and proper training with a continued focus on safety. Licensing requirements, of course, are necessary to promote public safety, both for the consumer, but in this space for the individuals providing these really important services that so many Californians throughout the state rely on and treasure. These requirements are necessary to promote safety and professionalism, and SB 803 streamlines the process that appearance professionals would undergo in order to legally provide their beautification services. The changes related to all kinds of different things in the bill stem, again, directly from the discussions that we had in various hearings and from a background paper that analyzed different reports and different data sets and precedent from throughout the nation. The changes related to the practical examination are intended to ensure that California's personal appearance professionals demonstrate competency in current aspects of the practice. The measure syncs training program requirements so that services that carry some risk are the focus of training, as well as the focus of regulated practice. That with the goal of reducing any of the burdens that government regulation imposes on individuals practicing in the beautification services space and doing their beautification artistry. As I mentioned, the bill will continue to take shape throughout the next number of months. And the feedback from valuable industry partners, licensees, and certainly the board is critical to determining the next steps and the path forward for the board as we work. Without legislation, as you know, the board will cease to operate and exist. And so the goal with Senate Bill 803 and any of the sunset review efforts is to have a comprehensive piece of legislation that continues the operations of a regulatory program while ensuring that there are necessary reforms and updates to the law to reflect how best the board should operate and what the requirements of government should be. I want to touch briefly on just some of the myths about the bill that I think have been swirling and might seem really fearful and scary, certainly to people who have not been part of this process. You know, it's really hard to engage in the legislative process when you're a small business owner working every day, practicing a craft like your licensees are. So it's been really helpful to have the engagement of so many members of the public, and we look forward to continuing to take that feedback moving forward in the life of the bill. I just want to briefly clarify that this bill is not sponsored by any corporations. It comes directly from the Sunset Review oversight process and the oversight of the board that we've all engaged in. This bill does not prevent people from being independent contractors as they currently can do today. SB 803 doesn't have anything to do with labor, tax, and wage laws. As you know, as board members, the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology does not have oversight for those. And while certainly, law-abiding professionals like the many licensees in your space are impacted by those decisions and enforcement by those various agencies, this does not impact any ability for an individual to work independently if that makes sense for them in their life, nor does it create any different pathways for further violation of laws that the board does not have oversight for, like labor and wage violations. The bill will not cause more people to get infections and be harmed. In fact, it increases the number of hours in infection and safety and sanitation and disinfection requirements. Obviously, as board members, you know what the data of your complaints looks like and what your enforcement cases look like. And, looking at the board's numbers and across the nation, we just don't always see instances of harm to consumers and licensees from so many of the services that are currently required to be regulated and required for licensure. The bill will not force any of our treasured important small businesses and salons providing these services throughout the state to close. Obviously, Californians will continue to value their relationship with stylists and professionals in the space. This bill won't change that. And, importantly, the bill will still ensure that students learn the safety, the techniques, and the protocols that are necessary to protect themselves and their clients. The number of hours of school as proposed in the measure is required in many states, and it still allows for the professionalism and the safety that so many people learn in school to be acquired. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss Senate Bill 803. Look forward to continuing to work with the board and appreciate your investment, engagement, and to all of you for spending the time that you do as volunteer board members working on these important issues. I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any kind of additional background or information throughout the course of today and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Sarah Mason. We appreciate you coming this morning and sharing that information with us. So now it's time for the board to review Bill SB 803. Staff has broken it up into meaningful sections. We should review the entire bill first. Then when finished, we can go back and make any recommended amendments that any board member may have to suggest to that. So to get us started, I'll ask Christy Underwood, our board executive officer, to lead us through the review of the bill. Christy?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So I am going to go through the bill based on what is in the informational material in your packets. And what I'm going to do is just go through the bill analysis that we have and touch on each of the sections and what each section what this bill does for each of those sections. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and here we go. So section 7303 increases the number of our board members. So this increases the number of board members to make sure that we have a member of each of our licensed professionals on the board. So it adds our members to 13, and we will have, it designates that each one of our licensees will be represented on the board. And the next section is 7313, which is, this is a kind of a technical cleanup. Many years ago in the statute, there was a section that stated that the number of PYs cannot be changed from our inspector program. We have no intention of changing any of our inspections program, but what this section did do was make it so we had no flexibility with actual state service classifications. Our inspectors are classified as inspectors and they can do inspections. However, if we wanted to look at models of other boards within Consumer Affairs, there's a lot of various classifications under the state umbrella that can be used to do this type of field work. So removing this language, which we're the only board that has anything like this, would just allow flexibility if we were to want to look into a different type of set of classification to handle some of our enforcement activities. Section 7314 is a technical change that would add to make sure that we can pay our health and safety committee members. It's something that we have not had in the statute before, and as you all know, our health and safety committee is extensive, and some of them come from out of state and all over our state of California, and they do that pretty much on their own dime. So this does allow us to provide some per diem for attending that committee meeting. Next is section 7316. This is the section that makes changes to scope of practice. I know this is one of the areas that is most heavily being discussed. I'm just going to give a brief overview of it. For barbering, it does remove cutting of hair, singeing, shampooing, arranging, dressing, curling, waving, and hairstyling. Pretty much removes the same thing for cosmetology as well. And then for our estheticians, it actually increases their scope of practice and makes some important changes with eyebrows and eyelashes that we really think estheticians are more apt to be able to perform. They do a lot of work on the face as it is, so it makes sense that they would perform services closer to the eyes. And this was a recommendation in our 2018 Sunset report. The next section is 7320. For those of you who have already served on our DRC, you can imagine that this is a very welcome change. This bill would prohibit people from practicing medicine, which we already have, but it also now does not allow you to offer these services. Many of these services are done in rooms that our inspectors are unable to inspect because they might have a client in there, and we of course wouldn't want to walk in on that. However, we are seeing more and more salons that are offering services such as mole removal, skin tag removal that is absolutely not within the scope of an esthetician or a cosmetologist or any of our licenses. So this would just increase that language so that we can make sure people know that they cannot offer those services that are considered medical. The next section is 7331. This changes our reciprocity, was what we call it in the office. It's really considered endorsement. It makes a person that comes from another state quicker to be able to go to work in California with a license. That is if they have tested and done their education and have become licensed in their other state. So the only thing that this amendment changes is the removal of the 3 years out of the last 5 years. And what this does is, one, it really allows people to get to work quickly who may have been licensed. We have people right now that could come from another state that provide or take very much the exact same exam that we provide here. Some states have more hours, some states have less hours, and yet if they've been working for 2.5 years in their state, they're not able to come to work for California. So this is a significant reduction of a barrier, especially to our military families that are coming in to California. The next section is 7334. This pertains to the apprentice, pre-apprentice training. This bill would allow the pre-apprentice training to now be given by the board. It's a 39-hour course on health and safety that we would need to develop. This, has been one result of the various apprentice task force meetings that we've had. And one of the things that the Division of Apprenticeship Standards has come out and stated that the pre-apprentice training for an apprentice program, there shouldn't be a charge for that program. So we want to make that program available to anyone that is wanting to go the route of an apprenticeship program. They would take this course first. It would likely be similar to what we have our health and safety course. So it would be an online course, and I would envision it even being a good course for future possibilities, possibly people that have been placed on probation. It could be a great health and safety refresher course for them as well. The next section is 7337.5. This bill removes the pre-application requirements. So it's important to note that this section comes before our next section, which I'll discuss, which removes the practical examination. The pre-application process was developed several years ago because the board was historically 8 to 9 months behind on getting applicants scheduled for their practical exam. And this allows students or schools to apply their students for the exam after they've completed a certain amount of their training, so that we can get them scheduled to as close to their graduation date as possible. And then that would allow us, the candidate, to take that exam and get licensed and get to work as quickly as possible. The only reason why the pre-application would be removed at this time is if it goes hand in hand with removing the practical exam. If the practical exam exists, if the practical exam is gone, there's no need for the pre-application process because everybody would be taking the written exam, which is offered at multiple locations throughout California. So that leads us into 7338, which is the practical examination and doing away with the practical examination. And this section, again, it's our practical examination. We provide this exam at 2 locations in California. I'm happy to say that we're very much more caught up than what we were of due to what has happened with COVID and our exam sites being closed. So we have been backlogged in this area before, and then it hasn't been a severe backlog since then. But this is kind of looking at removing this exam. This is happening in other industries, and it's happening slowly throughout the country, that other states are looking to remove their practical exams and make make a more written practical type of a test, where the written test will have actual scenarios instead of bringing someone in to be tested for certain tasks and being monitored by an examiner in one of our settings. The next section is a technical cleanup. It's just from old days, it had the word bureau and we're changing that to board, so that's just a cleanup. The next section after that is section 7353. This is similar to the inspections classifications issue that we had previously. This bill would also, it's written in our statute twice that we can't reduce the number of PYs. Again, we don't want to reduce the number of inspectors we have, but we just want to have the flexibility in the future that if there's another classification to use, that's an option for us. And this also removes the requirement for an inspection to be done within 90 days after issuance of an establishment license. As many of you already know, our focus is on consumer harm complaints. They take most of our time, and we haven't been able to meet the 90-day requirement ever that I'm aware of. And it does raise the question that sometimes the newer salons often are doing things correctly. It's sometimes we find the most violations in some of the salons that have been operating for many, many years. And we might see people get, a little more relaxed and not follow all the health and safety regulations. So we don't think there's any consumer harm in removing the fact that a new salon needs to be licensed. It's mostly to make sure they have all the minimum equipment, and it's pretty clear in our regulations what that equipment is, and it seems that definitely most people that are opening salons are following that. The next section is 7354 through 7357. The section is on mobile units. This comes from a bill that was introduced a couple of years ago, AB 817. The board supported that bill at the time. It's really just updating the very old regulations or statutes that were over the mobile unit when it was originally created. So this is really just updating it. We recognize that mobile units are a thing. They're not going to go away. I can tell you we only have 33 active licenses in California. So I certainly don't think that this is something that's going to remove work from any of our regularly established 55,000 salons. But if somebody does want to do this process and consumers are looking for this type of process, we want to make sure that they can do it safely, and we want to make sure that the statutes make sense. Again, some of the statutes that we've updated and again are outdated, and this mimics the bill that was introduced a couple of years ago. The next section is 7362. This bill is to talk about our courses. So this change removes the requirement for the board to approve the curriculum, and it instead establishes it in statute. So depending on what the board decides to do today, I think that this is definitely a section that we will need to think about again and come back to once we decide what the board decides to do. And I think it's definitely something that the board may want myself or board staff to work with the legislative staff to make sure that we fine tune this once we know exactly where this bill is going. The next section is 7401, and I'm sorry, just going back real quickly to that prior section, that is the section that does reduce the hours. It reduces the hours from cosmetology course from 1,600 to 1,000. It reduces barbering from 1,500 to 1,000. And it actually changes the statute for manicuring from 350 to 400, which is inconsistent with what is required now. We set that regulation for the manicuring course to be 400. So schools that offer manicuring courses have already been doing the 400 hours. This is just clarifying it in statute that it does need to be at least 400 hours. The next section is 7401. So this just changes the verbiage on the survey that licensees are asked to do when they renew their license. So it removes the reference to booth rental and changes it to independent. Or actually, it takes the word mentioned earlier. It doesn't have any impact on any labor issues. The board doesn't oversee any labor issues. I know there's been talk that this bill does away with the booth rental setting. That is not the case. It's just to clarify that impact any of our ability for enforcement. It's just a statute that has never been used successful in our cite and fine authority, what we tend to go to. So this is being removed just as a cleanup. That's a statute that has never been used, certainly in my 16 years, and I have not seen it used before that. And then lastly is 7407. This bill will make some changes to the administrative fines, and so the board will have to do some work to implement this. And what it says is that the administrative fines should be to make sure that we are fining individuals in salons and barbershops for actual violations that are a consumer harm. So the board would, if need to meet and review their administrative fine schedule and really look at the risks involved in every type of citation that we issue for every violation and determine that what is actually related to to harming a consumer. So you'll see in the analysis that we've put in there that we issue approximately, over $5 million in fines on an annual basis. And it's assumed that this amendment would reduce that amount by $702,000. I just wanted to explain that the $702,000 was we came up with that by looking at our administrative fine schedule and looking at violations that we felt had no impact to a consumer. And so, for instance, someone didn't change their address with us in time. That's a fine. So we took things like that. Again, when we have to do fiscal analysis, sometimes we have to guess because I don't know what the board would choose to do that. But that gives you an idea of what we looked at and how we came up with those numbers. So that is an overview, and I hope I provided a little more information on what each of these sections involve. And so now I will turn it back over to Mr. Weeks to open the board discussion on the bill.
Thank you, Christy. You did a lot of work preparing for that. We appreciate it. So now we should go back as board members, and if you've made notes going through, we should talk about individual sections that you would like to discuss or you have any sort of input on it at all. So I'll open it up for board members to comment on any section they choose fit.
Good morning, Steve and board members. Would it be a little easier to just go through each one by one, starting like we did with Christy with the overview for discussion? So I would say if we start with 7303, which is where the existing law is now wanting to up the amount of board members. I think, in my opinion, that's a great idea so that we have someone to represent every area of our industry. Having someone, school owner, esthetician, manicurist, salon owners, hairstylist. That's just my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on 7303?
Yes, Steve, this is Callie Mae. I would agree with Jackie's comments. I think it would be great to expand the board. I think that also increases our ability to serve the public. We'd have more members available to review DRC, more perspectives. And I think it would just increase the overall kind of resources we have available to serve. So I'm in favor of that.
Anyone?
Good morning.
Tanya Fairley, I just have a question. And in regards to that, if we specify industry specific, what happens when the time comes, and or would there be a verbiage in there that states, if we don't have that electrologist who wants to be a board member, that would allow for the board to be made up of majority of industry members versus the 6 specified?
Christy, what would you say about that?
I think that's a good point. I'm trying to think of how we could word that, but because we do have, I would hope we could find a representative from each of the license categories, but you never know. And so, yes, I think that might be a good idea if we recommend that if those licensees, if we're unable to meet that, well, if we're unable to meet it, the board would still be able to operate because we would have enough members to continue to hold business.
This is Sabina. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I just wanted to interject here real quick. For the proposal, it looks like the majority of members will be public members, and that's a great balance. As many might know, there's what's called a North Carolina problem. When it's something that's more industry heavy, we're trying to make sure we have a lot of public input. And again, just like, you pointed out, Tanya, if we can't get members, we can still operate. I think there's a lot of resources available to Christy to reach out between the appointments office and industry to try to really reach out and make sure we try to get everybody, get the information out there when we are needing new board members.
Derek, I see your hand up. I apologize. And I also want to congratulate you on your new look. So let's call on you now.
Thank you, Steve. I just had a question. Christy, when you were reviewing 7401 and 7402, your audio actually went out, so we didn't hear anything that you mentioned during that time. So I want to take this opportunity, if you can, if that's okay, if we can go over that again for the sake of having full clarity on everything.
Yes, let's move to it as we go through the process here, and then Christy can explain the staff position on those two items as we get to it then.
So in that language, Sabina, what would be the best thing to do? And with the legal language, that is.
You know, I'm not sure if anything would be required to be changed. I'm assuming the board thinks it's a great idea to have a spot for each type of licensee. That's the language that will get you there. I don't think I would recommend, and Sarah probably has some opinions on this as well, but I don't think I would recommend doing some kind of, well, if we can't find, you know, this and this and this, it can all be barbers. You know, I'm not sure if that would really achieve the goal. I think the goal is to have that diversity on the board and to make sure that all those very somewhat different, you know, licensee viewpoints are represented. So I think I'm not really sure what the board really wants. It's just really changing we're actually increasing the numbers, so there are more opportunities for more licensees and industry members to be on the board. So I mean, I think in the end it is a really great change, and it's not going to affect board operations that I can see, unless Christy sees something different.
No, I agree. And you know, it's the majority of that workload falls on the governor's office, because the governor's office is who will be making those appointments. And so I think even if we are unable to find some licensees, which is usually our easier step, is it's easier to find licensees than it is public members. So the governor's office is definitely going to have to do a little more work on this than they used to by increasing our number of public.
Well, then I'm okay with leaving it the way it is.
Okay, let's move to 7313. Also, it might be easier if I don't want to leave anyone out. So if you could raise your hands, I could notify who's up and who's speaking. I'll try and do it in the order that it came through. So does anyone have any comment on 7313?
I'm sorry, guys. When you say raise your hand, you mean video raise, or is there a button that you click?
There is a button, yes.
This is the moderator. If you open up the participant panel at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, there will be a little tiny raise hand icon at the very bottom of that. And if you click that button, it'll let you raise and lower your hand.
See, there we go. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Jackie, do you have a question?
No, I just have a comment to this. So what my understanding is that this language would allow us to, say, have the ability to hire more inspectors under a different classification. Is that correct, Christy?
It won't increase our number of employees. So we have a certain number of inspectors, and we don't see ever, you know, at this point, we don't anticipate changing that. What it would allow us to do is to say we go and look at how another board has their enforcement set up. And I'll use Contractors Board as an example because they have their own classification, but they have a specific classification for their enforcement. So they don't use inspectors, they use a different state service classification. we'll call them enforcement reps, even though that's not what I think what they are. They have that, and we wouldn't ever, if we felt the need to change our classification of a vacant position, for instance, we have several vacant inspector positions. They're very hard to fill positions. We could look at, well, maybe we want our those positions to handle cases and not just do inspections. Maybe we would want them to be field people that go out and actually do something completely different with enforcement. Go have a probationary meeting with a probationer and write up an inspection report there. So it just takes away that specific civil service classification, but it doesn't give us any more actual positions to increase our number of staff.
Got it. I was just in hopes that it would change that classification because we have such a hard time getting inspectors, I feel, because of that classification requirement. So I thought maybe that was something to help combat that a little bit, but okay. So it just gives you ability to change positions that you already have.
Exactly.
Any discussion on 7314? I'm betting there's going to be discussions on 7316. Jackie?
I do not believe we should be taking out why I just lost my words. Taking out practices that we do in our licensee, you know, cutting hair. I'm not a fan of this because then we're starting to nitpick our licensees. I understand that there are some thought process behind, because I understand we have to get current. And I know that there's a lot of blow dry bars out there that are looking at that, where they could hire somebody who wasn't licensed to do the shampoo blow dries at the blow dry bar. But my concern is that what Pandora's box that may open. Thank you.
Calumet?
Thank you, Steve. I too am really concerned about the removal of the suggested removal of these practices, just from a consumer protection and enforcement standpoint. I think it would be really hard to walk into an establishment and determine and note the kind of sanitation issues that we see and say, I wouldn't want for us to see something really dirty and have someone have a defense say, well, I actually only use that for styling hair. So technically that falls out of the purview of what you guys oversee. And so I shouldn't be that shouldn't be corrected, or I don't have to correct it. So I think it would create a tremendous amount of enforcement issues trying to parse through which things apply to coloring hair versus just regular styling, when all of those things are done kind of interchangeably or throughout a particular service. There's a mix of those kinds of services. So that would be my main concern.
Thank you, Calumet. Derek?
I'd like to concur with my fellow board members. I believe Calumet said it best. They kind of intertwine with each other, so I think it would cause more danger than anything. I do want to make note that in regard to the estheticians, I am in favor with adding the scope of their work, as we're seeing more of those things, and that has been the discussion in previous board meetings. So addressing that, I'm in agreement with. However, I want to make clear I am not in agreement with the changing of the scope for barbering and the cosmetologists.
Thank you, Derek. Tanya?
I think I'm definitely all in agreement with the rest of the members here. Removing the practical, basically, I feel like it definitely will open up a Pandora's box. It takes away from just the basic knowledge of showing and demonstrating what a person can do in in regards to the safety and health of clients. So I definitely think that this is a very important part. Doesn't need to be updated. Maybe some of the things that are demonstrated change, but to remove it, I think would not be beneficial to the public.
Kelly, do you have something else?
I forgot to put down my hand, but I actually do have another point. I'm thinking about just the kinds of citations we see. Another issue is just we have a lot of problems with completely unlicensed practice. Same thing. I wouldn't want someone in there, you know, completely unlicensed, no verification that they reviewed any of the health and safety provisions that we have, and the defense would be, oh, well, that person only, you know, washes hair, or I think that would create a lot of problems of proof. So that's it. I'm going to put my hand down now. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Derek, you have something?
Oh, excuse me, I didn't lower my hand.
No problem.
So, Sabina, how could we write this with what our recommendation is to not, you know, we want to obviously add in what I'm hearing, if I'm correct with the rest of the board, adding back, you know, the esthetician part, you know, we support that, but taking out the barbering and cosmetology part. Thank you.
Before, yes, wow, all over the place, sorry. I clearly need more coffee. I'm curious, and I didn't hear it, maybe Christy could explain a little bit. What was I'm curious for myself before I try to recommend something, and maybe Sarah could chime in too. Was the reasoning behind removing those, where did that come from? And maybe I lost that in translation. And so that maybe we could find a compromise. If I knew a little bit more about maybe where this came from, or the reasoning behind it, or what it was accomplishing, maybe we could figure out a compromise.
Hi, it's Christy. I just want to make a comment that I believe it came, you know, from the risks that are involved in the actual services. So what's the risk that's involved with chemical treatments based on the risk that's involved with shampooing? And I think that's what, you know, the legislature's been talking about through the sunset review process for a couple of years, is should we be regulating these practices that don't pose a risk to consumers? And then I want to just, I personally wanted to just mention that we are taking notes as we're going through this on what you are all saying. And I think after we get through the end of the discussion, I think we could make the motion. And from what I'm hearing the board saying right now is that they don't agree with the removal of the items that is proposed for the scope of practice for Cosmo and barbering. So that'll be part of our motion at the end, where we, if the board chooses to support with amendments, we'll list that as an amendment. We'll say we want the scope of practice for barbering and cosmetology to remain the same, and we support the scope of changes to estheticians.
Right. Thank you, Christy. This is Sabina again. So I don't think that we're not going to draft some specific language. We're not going to wordsmith it. You guys can include that, like she said, in your motion. I'm taking notes as well. I'm sure Sarah is. Everybody is taking copious notes. So we have a few different versions so we don't miss something. But what I'm seeing so far is that is the first proposed amendment from every section that we have discussed thus far without going to public comment, which I understand will be taken care of by the moderator at the end of this discussion and motion.
Before we move to the next session, the moderator would like to make an announcement.
Yes, this is the moderator. Just as a general reminder to our members of the public, we'll be taking public comment after the board members are done with this item. We will not be using the raise hand feature. We'll be using the Q&A box, and that will be available when we get to the public comment portion. So I please ask that you do lower your hands, as they will not be responded to.
Thank you, moderator. That moves us to section 7320, I believe. Any comments or discussion by the board? If no discussion there, let's move to 7331. Jackie, go ahead.
I think this, as stated, could be a positive change because of, that is, say we have someone from the military who is licensed in another state, comes here and they're shy, like Christy was mentioning, 6 months to get their license. I think that, if it's equivalent, like we want to help that there's not a barrier to entry to work in California. So I think this is a positive change.
Thank you, Jackie. Derek?
Yes, thank you. I agree that I think that it'd be positive in some aspects. I just had a question in regard to how is it currently gauged? So obviously we have a more required hours for licensure in California. So if somebody comes with reciprocity, are we comparing it? Like, is there a baseline number of hours that they need to come with, 500, 800, half of what it is, whatever that may be? How does that affect it currently? And also, if we do go forward with removing the 3 to 5 year scope, is there some sort of balance there where if they have less hours, then they will need to have those years of practice to kind of balance that out?
So we do not look at the hours right now at all. We get a certification from another state that shows how long they've been licensed, and it would also show that if they've had any disciplinary actions in that state. And one of the things that I think is important is it has to be license for license. So there are states out there right now that have just a hairstylist license. So we won't let somebody come who has a hairstylist license and get a license as a cosmetologist. They actually have to then, and usually do, go to school for the additional skincare and nail care. In Florida, for instance, the manicurist license, or not non-license here in the state of Florida, where I happen to be right now, is just a certification. So they aren't allowed to come to California because they are not licensed in the way that matches our statute. So right now, while we don't look at the hours that's required, we do look at their scope has to be similar, and and they have to have taken a test. If a state were to do away with their testing process and we have a testing process, I would assume we would then look to change that to make sure people are tested.
Thank you, Christy. Would that be added in this as well, that language, that they would need to be tested if we eliminate the exam, so to speak?
Well, if we eliminate the well, there's states right now that have already eliminated their practical, that we're letting the statute already allows them to come to California, for those who have been licensed 3 of the last 5 years. So we could receive someone right now from a state that doesn't have a practical exam, and if they've been licensed for 3 out of the last 5 years, they can get licensed in California.
Okay, if there's no other comments or concerns by the board member on 7331, let's move to 7334 regarding apprentice applicants. Derek, go ahead.
Thank you again. Yeah, I think I like this change here. I think it addresses some of the issues that we've had throughout our history with apprentice program, especially the area in which we now have proof that this was completed, creating a system in which it goes through us to have it documented and knowing exactly what those specific pre-apprentice program looks like. Working in conjunction with the health and safety, and as Christy mentioned earlier, possibly using this to have somebody or licensee go in for continued training throughout. I'm in agreement with that. I did write a note here, excuse me. Just to verify, this is just the 39-hour course, is that correct?
Sorry, yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Derek. Andrew?
I'm probably getting a little far ahead of ourselves, but I just worry about, I mean, I think it's a good thing that we will require this. I'm just wondering on enforcement, would we enforce, would we cite and fine a, for lack of a better term, an employer employing an apprentice that doesn't have this? Who bears the responsibility? Is it the potential apprentice who didn't complete the application or the course? Is it the employer who hires the apprentice, or is it both? It's just something for us to consider further down the road.
Okay.
And just a quick comment to that. That's great. That's a great comment. The pre-apprentice training is a requirement for licensure. So they would have to prove that they've taken that course before we would issue them a license. So that would definitely take some discussion and some work on how that process plays out, because it's different than what we do now. But that's a great point on how we will track that.
Thank you, Andrew. If no one else wanted to comment on that, let's move to 7337.5.
Well, isn't that based on what our opinion would be on 7338?
That's what I was just going to say. I think we'd have to have a decision, thought and spoke about that before coming to this.
Okay. Let's move then to 7338, the removal of the practical examination.
And I did want to mention also, before we start that discussion, that we do have Tracy Montez on our call today, and she has offered to provide any information. Tracy is over our examination development office within the Department of Consumer Affairs and is familiar with practical examination. So she's available as well to answer any questions from the board.
Andrew?
Well, as the old fogey here on the board currently, I don't like the idea of getting rid of the practical exam. I can only, it might not be a great analogy, but I'm trying to see how I would get my driver's license without being able to prove that I can parallel park. I don't know how I do that in a written exam situation. It's just, I think there are advantages to a practical exam and seeing whether somebody can actually do something rather than they can regurgitate language. And so I would like to see us retain the practical exam, but I probably going to get the short end of the stick on this one.
Thanks, Andrew. Tanya?
Actually, Andrew, I might be up there with you, because I definitely think that people learn differently. So I think my biggest question is how much of the as of now, how much of the grade, the pass and fail, is weighted on the practical part? Because some people learn better by doing versus reading. Doesn't mean that they can't read, but if they can't read and demonstrate what is being asked of them, then being able to show what is being asked of them works to their advantage. So I guess my question is, how much is weighted on the practical versus the written? Is it an equal weight right now? Because I don't feel like it should be removed if it's going to sway the pass or fail to someone being able to just only read what is in front of them and be able to demonstrate that they can do that.
Andrew?
So there are two things. I think, well, right now, I believe it's weighted 50-50. Yeah, it's weighted 50-50. So, I mean, if you have to pass both, so maybe that's not weighted at all. I'm just also thinking about certain situations. We have a problem with some language people not speaking English or not taking the English language exam, failing the written exam, and so therefore not getting licensed. This is still going to continue it. I'm wondering if retaining the practical and using it as a way to, and weighting it so it might, if you can demonstrate that you can do the stuff, even though you can't take a written test, that might be a way around the barrier of language that we've had over the last, since I was appointed to the board, at least. The other thing I can think of is I have a friend whose daughter just completed schooling, but is afraid to take the written exam because she's bad at tests. But if she could demonstrate to do it, she would probably pass and wouldn't do it, and therefore would get a license if that was a way for licensure. So I'm wondering if it might be worth looking into some kind of a hybrid system, whereas, if you pass the written exam, maybe you don't need to take the practical exam, but the practical exam is some kind of alternate method of passage. I don't know. Those are the other things that are on my mind right this second.
Derek, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Steve. I'd like to thank both Tanya and Mr. Drapkin for addressing those issues. I know that we've talked in the past a lot about language barrier, as well as many of the licensees having difficulty when it comes to test taking, whether it's language or the fear or comprehension when it comes to test taking. It feels to me that by doing this, we're actually creating more of a burden, more of a hurdle for people to get licensed and enter into the industry. And my other comment was, in doing so, does the burden of practice now fall onto establishment owners? And how is there specific training that must be required once somebody does go into an establishment to guarantee that we are looking at health and safety for the public in practice?
Thank you, Derek. Excuse me, Jackie?
Thank you all for your comments. I mean, obviously being some of us, I'm the second oldest person on this board. So as far as how long I've been here, I think a lot of different things about the practical exam. A lot of states now aren't doing it. So I'm thinking about how are we going to move towards getting more current. I do agree that taking the test is the written part. We see a lot of people fail that. But taking away the practical isn't going to change that, because even if they pass the practical, they're still going to have to pass the written. Now, with that said, the goal for when a student finishes school and takes their test, our concern, obviously, as the board, is that they understand health and safety. It isn't about how good they are at doing the service. We know when they get out into the field, they have a lot of work that they need to do to get better at their practice of it. We just want to make sure that they understand health and safety. Now, if that's done just by demonstration, then they're not comprehending it in language and understanding the force behind that of knowing. Could be one thing that we could look at. Another thing is, it's, under the pandemic, we were so behind. I know that, the board has caught up to an extent of getting licenses to people. It takes longer because we need to have the room and availability for people to take the practical, where if they could just go into an area and take a heavier written exam with more information on that. I know we can look at it both ways, but that could actually be a less of a barrier to entry because they're not waiting around to take their practical. So there's just some other sides of the coin to look at. Like, how can we move and quit being so old school, if you will? Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. If I could just interject a couple of remarks too. I know the testing companies are developing this written practical exam, where we can also test on the written exam some practical format questions. My concern on the practical is, with one person standing there observing 8 individuals taking their practical exam, this can be a very subjective decision on what happens in the exam. Was a zipper in a case left open? Was a stand tilted too far? Whatever it may be, that it's always been a subjective examination. I would be also interested to see if these skills could be verified in some way by the schools, indicating that they test them in this area, and that testing in the schools is then passed on to us. That might be another option. But the ultimate elimination of a barrier to disenfranchisement on testing is to eliminate the test itself. So there's something to be said actually in that area. So I think we have a lot to consider on this and step back to when we make amendments a little later too. I think, Tanya, you were next. No? Kalame, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, my opinion or my thoughts are kind of along the lines of Jackie and Steve's comments, in that I kind of see the possible benefits. And I just wonder, I guess my overall thought is, I wonder if there's a way we can design a written test that really gets to the heart of what we're trying to see in the practical exam. Again, I don't know if the practical exam, like, how much are we looking at, again, competency or like the ability to actually carry out these services versus what our purview actually is health and safety. Does it matter how good they're actually at the practice or at the beginning of their career? Or is it more important that we, again, the things that we go into salon establishments and cite for is, do they know the health and safety regulations? I think there are some benefits. Again, if we can design a good written exam that can really kind of simulate a practical experience, I do think it could be helpful in terms of the barrier to entry issues about timing and when people are able to get tested. I do think that we run 2 testing facilities now. I have to think about, if we stop doing that, that would free up a lot of resources, again, that we can recommit to inspections. It's persuasive. It's it's pretty important to me that other industries are also moving away from this. I think that that's something that we can't ignore, because I'd like to hear, it'd be helpful to me to hear other industries that have moved away from a practical exam. And, earlier we brought up a point that people from other states, if they've been licensed in a state that doesn't require a practical exam, there's no problem with them coming into the California and starting practice away. I think that creates like kind of a fairness issue. Like why would we hold necessarily California practitioners to a higher standard than, other states if we're willing to accept that other states trust their licensees who don't have to go through a practical exam. So again, I would be interested in talking more about what this new era or what a new written exam could look like to address all of these to meld these two scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you, Callie. I noticed that Tracy Montez has her hand up, so it'd be interesting to hear from her.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share some information. Again, as Christy mentioned, I'm Dr. Tracy Montez with the Department of Consumer Affairs. I've worked with your board, probably about 15, 20 years on various projects over the years. And just always appreciate the fact that you're willing to listen and consider our thoughts. So we are the testing experts for the department, and we work with many of the boards and bureaus and even some outside agencies. And I just want to affirm that all of your comments and concerns we hear from many of our boards. They're very legitimate about wanting to see individuals demonstrate skills, being concerned about health and safety, but then again, how do you balance that with entry into a profession and not putting up barriers? And so it's a great discussion, valid points, and I want to try to address some of them for you. First of all, again, like to remind you as a board, your focus is on entry-level competence. And as we heard, it's not whether or not these are superstars, if they go on and make lots of money and have, successful careers. It's just really about, can they demonstrate entry-level competence to do no harm to their clients? Are they aware of California health and safety protocols? And we have found that our boards are moving away from practical exams and oral exams, performance exams, and so forth, because not only are they expensive to administer, but they are full of errors. It's very, very difficult to create a standardized error-free process. And we're working with the dental board right now to remove their practical because they've had a lot of difficulty getting patients who have the same kind of tooth decay, if you think about it. And so because of all of the challenges with practical exams, you're seeing a trend not only in California, but across the nation to remove the practical exams. And what we're being reminded of is that every hurdle, as I call it, or requirement to get licensed needs to be robust. And boards have a tendency, as well as stakeholders and the public, is to use the exam as the one hurdle, the one catch-all. Really, it's every piece in your process, the training, the schools, and the exam. So what we're finding is our schools are doing a really good job of training candidates. So if they're learning those practical skills and graduating, what's the best way to then assess them? And we can do this through written exams. And again, most of us, when we think of a written exam, is we think of an easy multiple choice test that we took in school. And that's not the case with licensing exams. There's a whole methodology based on science of how to develop a good multiple choice test. And those questions or items are changing to like scenario based, which we heard of, where we can test application of knowledge. And so what we would like to do is to assist your board in developing or working with a vendor to get a written test that would focus on those critical health and safety issues in a more scenario-based type questions. We'd also like to make sure that they're kept simple, and that's one of the things that we do in our field is to make sure that the reading level is appropriate for entry level. We also run it through checks to make sure that we are not using terms that are unknown. We always work with licensees, but there's a lot of things we can do, even increasing the time for those that may be struggling with taking a test. But we certainly don't want to recommend a practical just because it's there and people pass it at a higher rate or weight it heavier. That's not what the intent of a licensing exam is. So we think, or we recommend, that you really do look at removing the practical, have a more robust but fair written test. And again, I want to say fair because that's one of our standards that we adhere to. Most people think the goal is to make a hard licensing exam. No. Technically, 100% of people could pass a licensing exam if they all met entry-level competence. Unfortunately, we know not everybody's at that level yet. But what we really want to do is create a situation that candidates can get through the training, the education, sit through that exam that focuses on health and safety, pass it, and move on and get out into the field, creating this nice flow that's fair and reasonable. And as we heard, moves more up into the modern process of getting folks out there into the field and earning a living. So that's my kind of 2 cents. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to ask them or answer them. And then at any time, if you'd like a presentation about exams, we're happy to come in and do that for your board. Because again, just as you have your training and your methodology, your parameters that you work with, so do we at the Office of Professional Examination Services, which is the unit in my program. But this is our passion, and we're always happy to help your board. So thank you.
Thank you for your input, Tracy. Andrew?
Yeah, I just had one last thing. It's more of a general thing, just based on what I've learned over the past year is that maybe we don't necessarily need to do what other states do. We can lead rather than follow. Florida, to me, is not a good example right now. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Kellerman? Okay, I'll go to Jackie then.
Tracy, thank you so much for all that information. It's so enlightening to understand how the process is made to create the testing over from practical to written. And I do, not just other states, but within here of growing and making changes to better assist the student taking the test. Now, from my understanding, and I just wanted to make sure I'm clarifying this, we require somebody to have at least a 10th grade education. Is that correct?
I
That
believe,
is correct.
yeah, that is correct.
Okay, so the test would be geared towards that level of education.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
And if I may too, I do want to say that exam development is ongoing and we evaluate it regularly. So if for some reason we were to see that the written test wasn't working and say 3-5 years down the road, 10 years, we need to go back to a practical, that's always an option. You have to constantly see what's working in the environment and modify it. And it's, as I said, with written tests, it used to just be multiple choice. Then we're getting to scenario based. With computer programming, we're doing simulations. Some of our boards, like architects, have diagrams. So it's always evolving. So you just, when you make a decision, know that you have the freedom to change that because you need to be responsive to the technology and the opportunities and the assessment. It's why, as you were looking at your scopes of practice, we evaluate the scopes about every 5 years, 3 to 5 years, because there's new techniques, methodologies, chemicals, tools, things like that. So it's really important to stay updated.
So Tracy, if we were, say, in your expertise to move to written tests, it could be done on a computer. And when you say simulation, could it be like a question could be showing a scenario and then the individual could visually see that and then make a choice on the answer for that?
We're probably not there yet. We could do a scenario where it describes it. It's possible to do pictures, but we'd have to kind of look into that a bit more, but it is possible. It just may not be like a 3D type of scenario, but it certainly, we can look into the type of graphics that would be reasonable. They're still a bit expensive. Pictures aren't, but when you get into 3D, those types of things, it can get expensive.
I could imagine. But pictures would be interesting to give them a visual. Thank you for that information.
All right, thank you, everyone. With no more questions at this point, let's move on to the.
I think there's a couple. I think Tanya has a question. Her hand's raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed you, Tanya, on that. Go ahead.
No problem, Steve. I was going to tell Tracy, thank you. And as my hand was up, she definitely answered a question that Jackie piggybacked on, was basically enhancing the written to for those people who are visual learners or hands-on learners, to make it a little bit more accessible for them to be able to comprehend what they are viewing. I think my concern and my question on the public side is, we are testing competency, making sure that they don't harm clients. Would that raise the percentage of the pass-fail rate on the written if we went to a written only exam? So is that pass-fail rated 70%, 80%? Is that something that the board would decide, or how would that change to make sure that the knowledge is truly there versus a 51% and you pass?
Right. So there's passing rates and passing scores. So each one of your exams has a unique passing score, and it's based on the difficulty of that exam. Now, most exams have a very similar passing score because it's entry level. So say, for example, you have a 100-item test, we would have a group of licensees that come in and go through a very specific process that we use to establish a passing score. And they look at the difficulty of each item and determine the expectation that a group of entry level would get it right. And so from that, we do a calculation, and that says, okay, about half of the people would get this right. Usually that results in a passing rate that's higher, but it gives us an idea of the difficulty of the test, because one of the things we find, especially with like law exams, if there's a new law, there might be an item that's very difficult because that new law, people don't know about it. But over time, as they learn that law, that item becomes easier. So it's rated differently. So each exam should have its own unique passing score that determines the passing rate. So we don't adjust it. We don't have expectations like, oh, only 50% should pass or 70%. Again, it's simply looking at that exam and saying, what is the expectation for entry level? How well should they know this information, or how well would they be expected to know the information? And that results in the passing rate. So long story short, we should not expect this to make it harder. We don't want it to make it harder. Again, the standard is entry level, minimum acceptable competence to enter into the profession. We would like to see your passing rate a bit higher. So again, that's why we're looking at the language issues, maybe some additional time to take the test, things like that. And, we've talked to Christy about that before. But again, we're not looking to make it harder. Just focus on entry level.
Thank you very much, both of you. I see no other board members' hands up. So let's go ahead and because obviously we're going to come back and revisit this. Let's go ahead to the very controversial section 7347, changing from a bureau to a board. Didn't think there'd be much on that one. Let's go to 7353. And the timing of inspections.
I just have a question on this one, 7353. It's the 90-day establishment inspection. I think piggybacking on what Christy said earlier about it's true, everybody's at top notch in the beginning. It's as they settled into their establishment that things seem to take a turn. However, I think my concern is making sure that the proper items are in place as far as what the establishment should have would be my question. Would that go away with this also, or would it not matter because an inspection can be done at any time?
So I think my microphone might have, or my headset might have cut out a little. Could you repeat your question? I only caught a little bit of it. I'm sorry.
I was just saying that I know that you had said earlier how most violations don't happen in the beginning, only because in the first 90 days, people are up and making sure everything is running right and nice. And then once they have settled in is when the violations seem to happen. But my question is, on a new establishment, how will the board or how will we be able to make sure that they have the proper equipment to even establish a space? Would that be removed, or would it not matter because the restriction of 90 days is taken off? So I guess when an inspection happens, if they don't have it, they just don't have it. They wouldn't have it then, they probably wouldn't have it.
So we inspect, I don't think it will change any of our inspection process. I think we still, our inspectors base their day. Usually they start with what we call a directed inspection, which is when our enforcement unit has received a consumer complaint and they need to send the inspector out for something specific. And what the inspectors do is say, okay, I'm going to this address for a directed, but they'll look at all the existing establishments that are around that area. And so sometimes we do get there within 90 days and sometimes we don't. That won't change. So people will still be getting inspected as they are now. And sometimes it will be soon. We try to get to everyone on an annual basis. We do provide that information when someone applies for a new establishment. We provide them with a self-inspection checklist as well as the information of what's required to have in the establishment. So I don't see this really being much of a change at all. It's not going to change our processes at all. It just really, we can't meet that statutory mandate. And so it will remove a law that we can't physically do. And honestly, we issue around over 20,000 new establishment licenses a year. And we would have to have so many inspectors to be able to even meet this mandate in the first place. So that's really what it's more about, just making an unrealistic mandate in the statute, taking it away. But our inspection process won't change now to what has been happening for quite some time.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that for my own establishment information.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Tanya. Can we do a quick change in plans here? I think I skipped over 7337.5. It's a couple of sections back. Does anyone have any questions or any discussion regarding the language for the pre-application process?
Well,
Check.
I would just assume that if we do move to, if this ends up, we don't have a practical exam, then pre-application wouldn't be needed, correct?
Right. Let's then go back to our next section, which is 7354-7357 on mobile units. Is there any discussion or comments? If no board discussion or comments there, let's then move on to 7362. And Derek, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I just had a quick question in regard to the mobile units. Do they currently need to comply with city ordinances, and how does that work? Getting the license through the board, and then obviously every city, county may be different. Is it regulated county by county basis or city by city basis? The way that, for instance, food trucks are with city ordinances where they can't be next to a restaurant or whatever the case may be. I'm just curious to how that would work.
It is. Every city and county is different. Some I know are very strict, and I believe some are not so strict. But they have to have their business license to operate within those cities, and some of them I know there are certain cities that only let them travel a certain amount of distance already. They're very strict about that, and some aren't. But it's different throughout the entire state.
Thank you, Derek. Any other questions? There were no questions on 7362. So now let's move to section 7362.5-7365, the reduction of barbering cosmetology courses to 1,000 hours for discussion by the board. And we'll start with Jackie, then Tanya.
Sorry, Steve. I was just going back. I think we skipped over 7362. We went from the mobile, and then the next one was 7362, which is a language about curriculum that is approved courses by the board. I think this one is going to need some work on it. So I would just suggest maybe the executive officer and legislative staff maybe come up with some language. Christy, what's your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think we want to make sure, and this kind of also goes with the next one, which if there's a reduction of hours, we want to make sure the curriculum is approved and is appropriate. So regardless, and so I definitely think this will be a section that the board would want me to work with the legislative staff and making sure we fine tune this section. One of the things, if there's a change of curriculum, we want to make sure that our schools are getting that new curriculum approved, whether it's through us and through the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary, who approves the full educational program, whereas we just approve the curriculum. So this is one of those sections, kind of like the pre-application, that depending on what happens with the bill, we just want to make sure that we stay in contact with the legislative staff to make sure that this actually addresses approving the curriculum.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying.
Good question, Jackie. So now we'll move on to the next item, which is the reduction of the barbering and cosmetology course hours. And Tanya, you wanted to comment?
Yes, hi, thank you. I've been over this over and over and over again, and I definitely think that the reduction of hours makes sense. I think that from both the perspective of a consumer and a establishment owner, I think what I've been looking at is hairstylists are really only interested in doing hair. So there's part of the curriculum that I feel could be change so that that is the main focus: safety, sanitation, and then their area of expertise. Reducing the hours from 1,600 to 1,000 will definitely take away that barrier of the additional debt that students receive, allow them to get in the workforce a little bit sooner, but also give them a hairstylist only exam, the same with the barber exam. Manicurists have only a manicurist exam. Estheticians have only an esthetician exam. So why not change the hours or shorten the hours so that the hairstylist can have 1,000 hours at hairstylist exam, but also allow them to have, I guess, more of a, what is the word I'm looking for a more focused exam for their career.
Thank you, Tanya. Jackie?
Tanya, I do agree with you. It would be nice to have a hair only. I think that, the amount of time that the student is going to school, 1,600 hours. My partner is in school to be an LVN, and that's how much she needs in order to become a nurse. So, it is a lot of hours from hair, which I'm not taking away that we need to practice health and safety. But what I'm reading about this is that this bill is just specifically saying they want to reduce it to 1,000 hours for barbering and cosmetology. It's not separating that out. Is that correct, Christy?
Yes, that's correct.
So I did take some time and I looked at all of, which is on in here, I do believe, all the hours spent in certain areas to be an cosmetologist. And one of the things, and I just want to ask my other stylists and barbers, when I went to school 32 years ago, but in my opinion, I remember spending a lot of time sitting around. Like there was a lot of hours I was just trying to do things to get the hours and services. So, I don't know, is there somewhere we could skim back so that, it's not taking, because if somebody goes full time, it takes almost 10 months to get through school. Now, if somebody's, a single mom, where are they going to have time to work? Or if they go part-time, it's going to take them a couple years to get to that 1,600 hours. So I don't know if it's just, is there a way we can make it a hair-only license, or do we specifically need to talk about how we can work around this as a board? Thank you.
I'm with you on that, Jackie. I think one of the things so let me say this from an establishment side. I have an apprentice, and my apprentice, once we finished these 3,200 hours, there was a lot of hours spent on things that were irrelevant to what she's ever going to do, right? So she's never going to do nails. She's never going to do facials. There was a big section of that. And that's on the apprenticeship side, which is, I think, $3,200 to become an apprentice, which is 2 years down the road, but they get the on-the-job training. In the salon, for the stylist, it's made up the same way, right? In the schools, they have this block of time for nails, esthetician, even barbering, which there's some light barbering that happens. the hair only license would keep them focused only on what it is that they really desire to do. And in the future, if they want to pursue getting a barber license, then they can go back to school for that portion of the barbering section or manicure section. I don't think now they do a lot of sitting around as much as they did back when we went to school. But I definitely think that the 1,600 hours is become more of a challenge, especially in today's economy, with the cost of minimum wage going up, the cost of living being higher, and the cost of these schools now are really, really expensive, that when they get out and they start working at $15 an hour, half of them can't even afford to pay back their loans that they've taken out. So reducing the hours will allow them to get in there more quickly. I think the amount of time spent on safety and sanitation can definitely be increased or detailed in per instance, but that's my last two.
Thank you, Tanya. Derek?
Thank you. I would agree with what my colleagues have said. I think at this time, a reduction of hours probably is necessary. However, I also agree with what was said, not for the sake of just reducing the hours, but really fine-tuning where those hours are spent in the scope of work, having more detail in that regard. I think that when we look at what the standards are, I know it was mentioned in here that 4 states are down to 1,000. However, the average is 1,500 standard throughout the nation.
Can't hear you, Derek.
Derek, it looks like we might have lost your audio. Derek, can you hear us?
Let's come back to Eric. Let's go to Tanya quickly.
Sorry, I forgot to put my hand down again.
Okay. Derek, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Now we can hear you.
Could you not?
Derek, we lost your audio right after you started talking, so if you could just go ahead and repeat, that would be great.
Yeah, so just one thing. It's now available for a cosmetologist to get a crossover license to become a barber for a limited amount of hours. However, it's not reciprocated for a barber to be able to cross over to get a cosmetology license. In creating these scopes that we discussed, where somebody can just go for hairstyling, so is this even in the discussion to allow that to happen in the future, where a barber can go and decide that they may want to practice some scope of cosmetology, whether that's nails or whatever the case may be? I know that now there is more interest than ever before for there to be a crossover for both barbers and cosmetologists. I know that to address what was said earlier, schools are practicing. It is a lot different now. They are more engaged. They're more excited about different scopes of work, and we are seeing that in our industry. But lastly, I'd like to mention that in the reduction of hours, it would probably be a great opportunity for the industry members on the board to maybe make some sort of suggestions as to which, if there is a reduction in hours, how do we fine tune that based on what's going on today in the industry that we're seeing in establishments and in our salons and barbershops. That would probably benefit this agenda to reduce those hours, but really, really finely detail where the bulk of that education must be in those hours.
Thank you, Derek. Andrew?
Just a couple of things. I think we need to and it's not we just as the board, but we as the state need to decide what we feel is required for an individual to get a license. I don't think we should base it on what other states do. I mean, I just read that Texas just approved a law allowing people to carry handguns without a license, background check, or training. I mean, so like I said, I don't want to rely on other states to decide those things for us or be a basis of what we decide. I'm afraid, basically we're cutting the hours by a third. For some reason, I have a gut feeling that does not mean school costs are going to be cut by a third. I have a feeling the cost of going to school is going to be very similar. So it's not, the quote unquote savings to the cost as a barrier of entry to somebody. It's more of they'll have an opportunity to pay it off sooner because they'll get it out sooner. But it'll probably be around, my guess is probably be around the same amount. I think, the state should look into providing more opportunities for people to get schooling without having to go to private post-secondary opportunities, which are more expensive. But it looks like we're getting out of that business as a state as well. The other thing that I was thinking about, and I might relate above to the putting the curriculum in statute, is that if we do that, am I correct? Then if we want to make a change to the curriculum, it would have to be a law versus something that we would have control over and can possibly execute quicker than having to go through the legislative process. I don't see Christy nodding yes or no, so I have no idea whether I'm right or wrong. But that's also a concern for me if we wanted to try to keep things, if we decide that, we need to adjust the 1,000 hours, we're not getting the right training for that, so we wanted to adjust that. I don't know if we want how easy it would be to find a bill sponsor to get that passed, to get that changed in law versus other systems. So those are just my thoughts.
So I'll jump in on a couple things. You're right that obviously if something's set in statute, that it would need a bill to make those changes. I do think the way the bill is written, that I would agree with, is setting the minimum standards in statute for the curriculum. I think one of the issues that we see, I know one of the concerns we have in approving new schools that are coming up is the way our curriculum is written in regulations right now is all they have to do is photocopy that curriculum and send it to us, and they have an approved curriculum. And I think that probably wasn't the intent. I don't think it should be the intent. I think a school has, by photocopying, certain aspects of our regulations can look very good on paper, and then they ultimately end up closing down. It's what we've seen with some of the schools that we did take action against that were not teaching students appropriately. And if you looked at their application package for approval, it looked perfect. So setting minimums in statute, the reason why I like that is because it does force a new school to actually develop a curriculum. Now there is curriculums that they can just purchase from the textbook companies, but I would still agree that that's better than photocopying something and submitting it to us. And again, so I think that goes back to the previous section that I agree whether we decide it's 1,000 hours or whether we think 1,200 hours or no change at all, I think that section definitely through this bill process is going to need to be worked on to fine tune that curriculum and make sure we don't put ourselves in that position. And then I also wanted to just make a comment that there is a barbering crossover course or a cosmetology crossover course. So if you're a barber and you want to become a cosmetologist, we do have that set up to where you can do that. There's certain hours from every license that can be transferable to the other license. So it just depends on what you want to do. I believe a barber that wants to be a cosmetologist would need an additional 300 hours, 200 in skincare and 100 in manicuring, and that would allow them to go test to become a cosmetologist.
Thank you for that, Christy. I was not aware of that. I know we had this discussion about a year ago. And was that something that was implemented new? Because at that time, I don't think that program was available.
No, we've had a statute in place for some time for crossover exams.
Jackie, do you have a question?
I have a couple. So one is Christy because getting back to the main meat of this bill, they are specifically saying barber and cosmetology. When I broke down cosmetology of each area, you need 40 hours in chemicals, 65 in hairstyling, 60 in bleach, 20 haircutting, 200 in health and safety. As we broke it all down, then the technical side of it, you need 240 hair services of hours. And so you're doing tons of technical haircuts in order of hours to do the technical part. Breaking it all down for cosmetology, I'm sure there's stuff as you and I were in a, I can't remember what it was called, the committee where we went through this to try to come up with the hours for a hairstylist only license, which I believe we got to about 1,000. Would the author of this bill be open to changing that cosmetology to just hairdresser only? Or are they really looking at the cosmetology hours in general?
Jackie, I'm so sorry, but it sounds like I might have lost your audio. I'm not sure if everyone else did. It could have just been me. But I think you were talking about the committee when we reviewed the 1,600 hours, maybe?
I did.
And I didn't catch your question.
So we came up with hairdresser only. We came up with about 1,000 hours on that. Would the author of the bill be willing to change the verbiage from cosmetology to just a hairdresser only? Because I think cosmetology, I don't know. I mean, we spent a lot of time trying to shave off some of the hours for cosmetology as well as barbering in that committee we all got together with. I mean, I see that New York is only 1,000 hours for cosmetology, and they're quite a large state. I just want to, I don't want us to be caught without having a say in this. So I didn't know if the author would be open to hairstylist only instead of cosmetologist.
So I think the discussion is, well, that is what the board recommended in our sunset review report that we submitted, was establishing a hairstylist license. So that's certainly something that the committee can include in their motion today, that you want to support the bill if it's amended to include a hairstylist license. I think when it comes to either or, you just have to be careful because we do have about 200,000+ licensed cosmetologists who are licensed to do hair, skin, and nails. And I know that a lot of the cosmetology, it's been known for many years that the majority of cosmetologists are mostly doing hair, but there are cosmetologists that are doing skin and nails. So I think there would have to, maintaining the cosmetologist license and adding a hairstylist license is what the board had previously recommended to kind of hold on to that cosmetology license. So I just think we need to word that into our motion at the end of this review.
So, but what you're saying is that was already presented, but obviously it wasn't put in this bill, even though it was our recommendation. So
that's correct.
We would be going back and saying the same thing again. If we were to
That's
say,
correct.
Okay. I just want to clarify to make sure, because I wasn't there for sunset. Interesting. I mean, because when I'm looking at all the hours, I think the only thing I really don't know. I mean, we spent so much time trying to figure out how to change the hours to reduce it. So it goes from 6 months training versus 10 months full time, or 7 months training, I'm sorry, to 10 months full time. I mean, like I said, if you all look at the breakdown of hours in every section of cosmetology, that's something we should discuss.
Okay, Andrew, do you have a question also?
Yeah, I just have one last thing. And unfortunately, everybody, I've got a hard out at 11, so you'll have to forge on without me. Did the what do you want to call it? Did the committee communicate to you, Christy, of why they're rejecting our proposed hairstylist license and just reducing it all to 1,000 for everybody? Did they give any kind of guidance on what their thinking is on that, or is it just here it is, take it or leave it kind of a thing? Yeah.
So I think I didn't have that direct discussion about why not a hairstylist license. I think the discussion for the last 2 years, where we've had some multiple, public hearings at the Capitol, is the issue that has been brought up is 1,600 hours or 1,500 hours too much to become licensed or that is required by this board? Is it too much, and does it create a barrier to entry? I think that's where the discussion stems from. If you recall, there's been lots of discussions in our prior hearings that we've had at the Capitol, and so that's what it comes down to: is the 1,600 hours and the 1,500 hours too much? There always been other professions reference that require a lot less hours, and those have been the discussions. So I think in looking at that and looking at other states that have New York's been 1,000 hours, I think, forever. Obviously Texas just went, and I believe others are looking. I honestly believe everybody's waiting to see what California will do. Many states, I think, will follow whatever California does. So it's just been the ongoing discussion of, is this there's the cost of school that the students have to incur, and then the rate of what, if they have loans that are still unpaid, things like that have been the discussion for the last several years as to why this is even being recommended in this bill.
This is Steve. Can I speak to your statement on that, Christy, on the number of hours? Because I had to really, I really debated this in my mind on what was proper and what would be correct. I looked at what else is happening inside the state for the number of hours that students have to put in for it. You can become a massage therapist in California for 250 hours. You can get your teaching credential in 300 hours. You can become an EMT in the state of California for about 400 hours. You can get your 2-year community college degree for about 600 hours. You can even get your master's of business administration at most universities at less than 1,000 hours. So even a police officer in Los Angeles, it's 960 hours. They have to go through training, 960. And they get a gun at graduation and the ability to make life and death decisions. Last week, I spoke with the former chairman of the Texas Cosmetology Board, wanting to get some background information of what their experience had been. And I think it's relevant that we look at the Texas model, because this is a state that went from decades of 1,500-hour cosmetology education down to 1,000 hours. And what they found was fairly remarkable. Before reducing their hours, they commissioned a national study on cosmetology and barbering from an independent research firm. The study found that there was no relationship between the total number of curriculum hours and overall exam pass rate. The extra 500 hours did not affect the student's ability to pass the state licensing exam. But they felt that the extra number of hours did create a barrier to the entry in our profession. But most importantly, on Texas, the Texas model, I hate to model after other states too. I'm with you on that. But most importantly, Texas has had a high school cosmetology program since 1975 that only requires 1,000 hours of studies for these high school students to qualify for their examination. While the state requires other cosmetology schools to teach the 1,500 hours of instruction. And 40% of the licensees in the state of Texas receive their education from public schools. So they have a huge actual control group there to test what the actual reduction of hours mean. And they found no difference in performance or competency between 1,000 and 1,500 hours of study. So their 45 years of experience I thought was interesting, and I think it's something that we should look at, and I feel fairly strongly that we should reduce the hours. It would be my positions on this. And I see Jackie wants to be recognized.
In more ways than one, Steve. So I mean, it's yes, we don't want to copy other states, but also knowledge is power, right? You went and researched that to see what works and what doesn't work. So I just think we need to learn change, and we need to be open to change and see what that may look like, of taking all that information instead of, like you're saying, stick with, oh, we needed this. Like, there's something we could do to make a change in reduction of hours. If it's not obviously 1,000, then what could that look like? Because the legislative is going to always keep coming back to this. They've been doing it for years. So either we say something and give our opinion on it of where we want it to land, or they're going to do it without, what we say. So we need to think about that. That's all I got on that.
Thank you for that. Tanya?
I was just piggyback on what Jackie said. I think if we're moving, and see, by the way, I only did half of this research, so thank you for completing the list of the hours. But I think that if we want to move forward, and we want to continue to thrive in this industry, then we definitely have to make some changes, and part of that would be the reduction of hours, but in a way that makes sense. Make sure that we're not cutting out necessary curriculum that's needed, but also taking out things that aren't serving the purpose of what these stylists or cosmetologists are really trying to achieve, especially since there are programs out there that are allowing them to continue the education in a specific area: manicurist, barbering, esthetician. So the reduction of hours, I think, will definitely create a huge impact on people being able to further their careers and become licensed stylists.
Thank you, Tanya. Let's keep moving ahead. Because we're almost at the end of the section, and we're going to be reversing and going back on the motion, looking at some of these sections. So let's move right now to section 7401. Does anyone have a question on that? And Tanya does. Or not? Okay, no problem. If there's no questions on 7401, let's look at 7402. If there's no questions on 7402, let's look at 7407. And that would put us through our review of the individual portions of the act.
I think Tanya has something to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. 7407, is this the fines for the actual consumer harm? Because is that what the 7407 is, Christy?
It is. What 7407 does is the board will have to review our list of administrative fines. I believe we have 68 items. We would have to look at all those and say there's consumer harm related to this violation. So we would keep that as a violation, or this one, there's no evidence of consumer harm. So maybe we would not have a violation for that.
Okay, so that's a board thing where we'll get together, not so much of what needs to be. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, if that's it, then we are ready to look at a motion and I'm certain to look at amendments. Do we have a motion? If not, I would like to move that we support the bill with amendments.
I second that.
I
Okay.
third that.
Okay, great. That being the case, now let's go back and we reviewed the bill item by item. Let's go back to the items that you think should be amended. And you can start anywhere anyone wants to pop out on that one.
Okay, I'm gonna go 7316.
Can you hold on 1 second? I think Sabina might
Sure.
need to interject there.
Sorry, Jackie, you were just taking the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say the first one I had in my notes is 7316 with the not removing those scope of practice for barbering and cosmetology, but we're keeping them for the other one. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Sabina.
Sorry. Go ahead. You are definitely on the right track. I was trying to summarize it for you all, but go for it.
So my motion would be to change 7316 to remove the change to take out the barbering and cosmetology in that language.
So I think that the section, what we would say is to maintain the existing statute with no changes.
But don't we want to have the changes with the aesthetics part?
Yes, I just meant for barbering and cosmetology.
Correct. Okay, great. Thank you.
Maybe we could also add, I agree with that entirely, that those two sections should be brought back in. I think especially barbering was kind of gutted on that. What happened in this one particular section of the bill, I feel a little bit like, what's the old adage that the baby was thrown out in the bathwater? And I think that's what happened here. I think we've got to put some things back in. Is this the place that would be appropriate to allow for a haircutting license whose reduced educational hours and testing would be determined by the BBC? I know we've acted on somewhat on the haircutting license in the past, but it seems to be a term that's floating through without any educational hours or testing assigned to it so far. And I think maybe the board should revisit that and determine what would be best for that.
If that ends up being what the board wants, I think that you could just delegate to the executive officer and the staff and legislative staff to find out where, because it's going to affect more than one statute, of course. It's going to affect fees, it's going to affect a lot of things. And so if that's the direction the board wants to pursue, then you should be able to just delegate that authority, because we can't possibly figure out what every single statute is going to be affected by that right now. So then you can delegate that to them should you desire to then institute it would be a new license type.
Okay. The other thing is esthetician and cosmetology, that we should maintain lash extensions in their scope of practice.
I agree. I think we wanted to keep
agree.
it all pretty much the same. I mean, with the esthetician, but I was just asking to, I think Christy said to just keep it the same as far as the barbering and cosmetology, that they want to take out that we can't do those or, you know, it wouldn't be under our licensee.
Right.
I'm sorry, I need clarification on that one again. Are taking out the wording that cosmetologists cannot do lash extensions, or
No, I'm saying
No.
the only thing I wanted to do on this, my motion was to, on 7/3/16, I want to keep it the way it is currently by not adding in this language that they're wanting to do where they'll be removing, cutting the hair, singeing, shampooing, arranging, dressing, curling, and removing hairstyle from barbering. I want that no with that, you know what I mean? I want to keep it the original language, except I do want to add in the additional things that the estheticians can do. So it expands them more under their licensee is what my feeling is on that, because I don't believe we should nitpick these other two things and take them out of what we're already currently doing as barbers and cosmetologists.
So if I could maybe sum that up real quick for everyone. Again, I'll try. I think that part of our motion will be to not accept the proposed strikeouts of the scope of practice for barbering and cosmetology. Okay, so that maintains our language as it is. We're not going to accept their strikeouts. We want to ensure that the esthetician scope of practice includes lash services, lash extensions, because I believe that might have been taken out in the bill. So we want to make sure our estheticians maintain that they are able to do lash services. So that's what we have on the changes to the bill. And then we want to, and of course this is should the board agree, we want to establish a hairstylist license at a reduced number of hours that the executive officer will work with legislative staff to pursue that request.
So would all that be done under this one section?
Yes, I think that's perfect for this section.
Okay.
It's going to be one big motion. So the motion is to support if amended, and here are all the amendments we want.
Okay, so we're just speaking though on 7/3/16 right now.
Absolutely.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, does someone have another section they would like to talk about amending? Tanya? Tanya, do you have something?
yes, I'm sorry, I thought I unmuted myself. I was looking at the reduction of hours. Would that still be under the 7316, or would that be its own?
That's 7/3/38.
7338. My papers fell, so I'm sorry. I'm trying to stay organized here.
No problem.
I want to support the reduction of hours with amending, with making sure that there is clarification on what those hours would consist of.
We have a second?
Christy, and Sabina, how would we word this? Because do we have to give a specific number of hours right now?
Sabina, so I don't think, I just want to make sure we're not taking each of these as individual motions. These are all going to be included in one motion. So going back to Tanya, I want to make sure, so you're saying you would support a cosmetologist being at 1,000 hours and a barber being at 1,000 hours, and you would encourage the executive officer, myself, to work with the legislative staff to make sure we are fine-tuning those requirements that are specifically listed under those sections.
Yes, you said it perfectly.
Luckily, we're recording.
Dina. I agree with the motion information. We already have a motion on the floor to support with amendments, and now we are just going through and fine tuning which amendments are included in that motion. A lot of this, you're going to see that we're going to delegate that authority to the executive officer and legislative staff to fine tune to make sure it reflects your desires and the specific outcomes.
So with that, Tanya, do you think 1,000 hours is enough for a cosmetologist and barber?
I do. After breaking down what is in the training, especially since I've had apprentices and the schooling, I think 1,000 hours is perfect.
Yeah, that was my question to you because I know that you train. I don't. So
Yes.
I'm just basing it on 32 years ago. Thank you.
Are there any other sections of the bill, Derek?
Yes, I'd like to kind of keep an open door as far as the hour reduction goes. I think that everything that was said is right on track with what we've discussed, and I agree that we should kind of fine tune things. But what happens if we begin to fine tune those hours and we say it's going to be 1,100 rather than 1,000? Are we able to do that, or are we stuck with specifically being at 1,000 hours? I just want to have kind of that safety net for us to be able to review these things, especially with new services that are being created and the way the industry trends are going. Maybe there's something that we're specifically not looking at in this particular moment. So I want to make sure that we have a little bit of that leeway in there to do that. With this motion, are we held to the 1,000, or can we, after executive officer and staff reviews it, can we then go back and say, okay, well, we looked at it and it may be 11 or 1,200 or whatever the case. Still getting a reduction, but having that flexibility.
So I think the motion today will set us, we're going to provide our recommendation to the legislature on this bill. So I do think it's kind of set in the sense that the motion needs to say we either agree with the bill or we don't agree with the bill. It should be. So I think we do have to agree on that. I do think that this bill is probably close to going to the assembly. And that it has to go through that process, and then it has to go through the process of going, the entire legislative process, and ultimately to the governor. So we are able to meet again on this bill and look at any amendments that do come out and make fine tune, and we would take another motion in a sense to make sure we still support it with amendments, and maybe something changes along the way that we want to make known. And so there is another opportunity for us to vote on this bill. But I do think today we have to tell the legislature that we're supporting this bill, and this is what, with these amendments, this is what we want to see changed.
Derek, my question to you, because I believe you have had apprentices as well, correct? So how do you feel about reducing that from 15 to 1,000? I guess I feel I'm not opposed to reducing hours. I just don't know what exactly that should be.
If I could jump in real quick before you comment, Derek, just to let everybody know that this will not change the apprenticeship program. The apprenticeship program will maintain at 3,200 hours, regardless of what we set the schooling hours to be. And that is because per the Division of Apprenticeship Standards, that 3,200 hours is not created by the board. That is what is required to be an apprentice.
Oh, no, I totally get that. The apprentice is different. I'm just saying, like, I just feel like nervous to be putting a number on it right today when I feel like, I don't know. I just wanted yeah.
Jackie, I think that if you break it down, I mean, you did the breakdown. if you break it down and look at the actual breakdown of what the hours are, that what they're doing, you come up with, I think it's 996 hours or something like that. So 1,000 hours within the scope of training is right at what they're getting as far as being trained in the stylist portion of the hours. You can add back in the nails and the facials and all that stuff, but if you take a look at that, break it down, it's not that, I don't feel like there will be a lot that has to be amended that takes away from their actual training for that specific industry.
I did break them all down. So what I have though is 485 hours under the book part of hair. And then the technical part of hair is 475 hours. 485, did I say? So yeah, 960 for the hair, but then this isn't taking out the cosmetology part of it. So we still have, for esthetician, the practical is 70 hours, and the book part is, 250 and 70 on that, so it's 320. And then they have the nail part, which is, sorry, 280. So if we go down to 1,000, I don't know how we can, I'm sure we could do it, because I think we could take out some of those technical hair hours, like 207, 240, I think was for, I'd have to look back on what that specifically was, but.
So if I could just interject to try to make sure we're on the same page. I kind of am hearing two different things. It sounded like we agreed that maybe there should be a hairstylist only license. And now we're talking about the cosmetology hours. So if we were successful in getting a hairstylist license, would you still agree that a cosmetologist license should be at 1,000 hours? So then the hairstylist license might, and I'm not looking at the actual statutes right now, so perhaps a hairstylist license would end up being something like 700 hours.
Correct.
So if the board agrees on that, then I don't think we need a motion to address what's in the bill right now, because the bill right now is recommending that we go to 1,000 hours. So I think if you feel, and this is a discussion for you all, if you feel that it should be more than 1,000 hours, I think that's would be the amendment we would request. Otherwise, we don't need an amendment for the 1,000 hours.
I, for one, would be comfortable with the 1,000 hours, but I do have a secondary question. What about implementation of this? How are we going to work the implementation of the timing of these hours to people that are in school right now as opposed to not?
Definitely think that we will need to work with the legislative staff for implementation language to be placed in the bill for when this would become effective. We will definitely have to address that.
Tanya, when you're saying going down to 1,000 hours, and I added that all up, it was 960 under the hair of what I'm seeing right now. Where would you shave back that you would take stuff off in the hair to compensate for the face and nail?
I would have to look at that more in detail. I think that there is, I don't have that breakdown in front of me, Jackie. My apologies. But when you're looking at technical hours, when you're looking at them actually serving the technical hours, it's about repetitiveness, right? So someone doing one thing for 40 hours is going to make them be able to grab the concept and be able to perform it, whether they did it even for 80 hours. So there's some room in there where if they're doing their curriculum, set curriculum, we don't need 100 hours for perm rods and wrapping, and not that that's in there, but do you see what I'm saying? There's a shift that definitely can happen.
It is in there. Like, I think the technical hours is 475. So you're absolutely right on that. You don't need to wrap a perm for 40 hours a week.
No.
So that's where we could take some hours from there over to the two other areas. I'm just trying to make sure we don't trap ourselves with not enough hours.
I agree. I totally understand that. But I also think that, there's two sides to that. If we continue at the 1,600 hour rate, then we will continue to have that long drawn out process of someone trying to get into the industry sooner and can't. And there has to be a way for it to be a little bit easier for them to transition into the workforce. And 1,600 hours full-time is 10 months. Part-time is almost 2 years. That's a long time.
Agreed.
But I think if we agree on 1,000 hours, collectively, we can take a realistic look at what technical is being forced now and shift that to the appropriate places without sacrificing safety and sanitation, color application, the things that are pertinent in what they do. Because we think about it, schools only prepare you to pass the state board. They get their on-the-job training actually being in the salon.
So I just, I'm a math freak, so I'm getting it all. I did the math for each area. For hair, not the technical part, it's 485 hours of what we currently have in our curriculum. And then for esthetician, we have 250 hours for non-technical education. And then, well, I'm sure you do some stuff in that as well. And then in manicuring, it's 135. So the three areas without the technical parts where we're seeing the repetition of wasted time is 870 hours. So then let's see, 130 hours be enough for them to practice all three of those areas? Hair, esthetician, and nail.
So if I could just jump in, I'm not too sure we need to get that detailed today. It might be something that we might need to work through. So I'm not sure. I am a little concerned that we might be losing a quorum soon, and the board does need to vote on this bill today, and we do have to open for public comment before we vote. So I think we can still make your voices known without at this just today getting into the actual details of that of those numbers, if that's all right.
No problem. I just didn't want to corner us in making that decision and then we make a mistake and we're like, if we can go back and change it, then no problem.
Christy, do we need to reestablish a sunset date?
We do. The bill does not have a sunset date contained in it right now. So I think part of our motion, our amendments with our motion should be to establish the board's new sunset date, which normally is 4 years out.
do we want to say 4 years out, or can we say January 1st, 2024?
I think it would be January
25.
26.
4 years?
4 years is usually, sunset is usually 4 years. I think we just need to ensure that we have a full sunset extension placed in the bill.
Okay.
So I just will jump in real quick. I think I understand the board's, in our motion right now, we have not removing the scope changes that are recommended in the bill for barbering and cosmetology, establishing a haircutting license, which the executive officer will work with legislative staff to determine what that should be. Ensuring that lash extensions are in the scope of practice of an esthetician. We agree with the 1,000 hours, but need to the executive officer to work with legislative staff to define clearer what those requirements within that curriculum are going to be. So I believe that's what we have right now.
Perfect.
That sounds like it covers everything. So the next step would be to call for a vote of the board.
We would need to, actually, at this point, we would need to open to public comment if there's no more board discussion.
Okay.
And I think we just want to, we'll have the moderator come on to discuss the public comment and how that process will work. But we do want to make sure that the public knows that we are limiting to one-time speaking and 2 minutes only. So we will turn it over to the moderator at this point to go ahead and provide those instructions.
1 second though, Christy. I just want to make sure on 7362 that we're all okay with the executive officer working on this language compared to what they had. I just want to make sure we got all of our voices heard.
Yes, and that's for the curriculum. So I mean that piece is going to take work and work regardless.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure we got everything on the record that we wanted to discuss. Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, this is the moderator. And with that, I will go ahead and open up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that icon with a question mark within the square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. Currently sharing instructions on the screen for your reference. And in the Ask field, typically the lower right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, please type, I would like to make a public comment and send to all panelists. At this time, it looks like we do have a couple individuals who have requested public comment. So we will go in the order that they are received. So please do not continue posting comments if you have already posted one. We will first go with our first individual identified as Fred Jones. All right, Fred, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Good morning. It's still morning. Fred Jones on behalf of the Professional Beauty Federation of California. We're disappointed that the author ignored all of our industry input, including the hairstylist license, shifting BPPE oversight to you, increasing the externship program for students, extending AB5 protections to manicurists, and not only protecting the practical exam, but going back to aggregate scoring to help particularly English as second language students that do better on practical tests than written. So we're disappointed that all of our suggestions were ignored in SB 803. Furthermore, the bill as of this morning has been officially assigned on the special consent calendar, which means it could pass by Friday without even a debate or discussion on the floor of the Senate. notwithstanding the fact that we have registered our opposition. So we are concerned about that. We're also concerned that it's leveraging the sunset of this board for these rather radical sweeping reforms. We believe that a hairstylist license will take care of the barriers to entry. I don't think you should reduce the master Cosmo license, which includes all three segments of our industry. But a 1,200-hour hairstylist license and possibly match that with the barber license seems like a good way to address barriers to entry concern. There are other good stuff in the bill, but we have to focus on the bad stuff right now. Thank you for your time.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Oops, typing on the wrong computer. My apologies. Individual identified as Wendy Cochran. Wendy, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Good morning, Wendy Cochran, licensed esthetician, California Aesthetic Alliance, and California Estheticians Esthetician Advocacy founder. On behalf of over 6,500 members of our grassroots organizations, we support the changes in SB 803 if amended. While we agree that haircutting should be a regulated service, we cannot miss this opportunity for the revision of our scope of practice for the first time since 1978. Think about being restricted to the tools of your trade that you used as a business person, an industry member in 1978 that you had available to you at that time, and how competitive you would be today. You wouldn't be. And many of you probably would work outside of compliance and regulation too. We don't want that, especially with lash extensions. California estheticians have been hobbled by a 43-year-old scope of practice that is far behind what estheticians are safely complying with across the country. These aren't services that insurance companies are challenged by us providing. They are commonplace, but they just weren't a thing in 1978. If we miss this opportunity, our scope will be half a century old by the time we can come back to sunset. Don't be swayed by other companies and manufacturers and other advocates in the industry that want to kill SB 803 because they are going to lose money or support of the public school or the private schools that sponsor them. Please listen to your licensees. As board members, and none of you are estheticians, you should be promoting the equitable treatment of all license types and not favoring hair. We appreciate your support in advancing our industry. California estheticians support SB 803 if amended. Thank you for your time.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual. Individual identified as Jessica Cattrall Goldstein. Jessica, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, my name is Jessica Cantrell Goldstein. I'm a California state licensed esthetician for the past 18 years, also a California state licensed manicurist for the past 15 years. Please pass SB 803. It's so vital to estheticians that we have the capability to expand our scope. As Wendy previously stated, it is been 48 years since we have had an expansion in our scope. I fully support other things that are in this bill, and I truly hope that you take the licensees into consideration over corporations and private schools. Thank you for your time today.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Carrie Bennett. Carrie, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks to the State Board for everything you do to protect consumers. And what I want to talk about specifically is removing hair cutting from this bill. I would like to see hair cutting remain a licensed part of our scope of practice, and here's why. I believe that if we take the license away from haircutting, we will create an unskilled workforce who may go work in a chain salon for minimum wage, or they may just go underground and never pay a penny of tax to the state, never be inspected. They may be working from garages which are unsanitary. There's no way of really regulating that. And I think that that is more harmful to the consumer than the barrier of employment that the author of this bill thinks that licenses create. How many people on this call go to a skilled, experienced hairstylist or barber? Are they going to go on? Are people going to go online and look for unlicensed, unskilled, untrained people to do their hair? I feel that it's important to keep this this scope of practice licensed, because I feel that removing this license, I'm sorry, I just lost my place in my notes. I feel like haircutting needs to be licensed to ensure
30
public health,
seconds.
and the use of unsanitized haircutting equipment can result in lots of infections those people will not be trained to spot. And I feel that if we remove the license, they could use tools that are unguarded, like razor blades for barbers, and this puts consumers at risk. I've been a licensed cosmetologist for the past 40 years and a salon owner for the past 25, and I urge this board to support an opposition.
This is the moderator. Unfortunately, we have reached our time, so I have muted the individual, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Melissa West Durfee. A moment while I find her in the attendee list. Here she is. Melissa, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, my name is Melissa West Durfee, and I've been in the beauty industry for 15 years, but I'm new to California from Oregon, where I've spent the last 15 years doing mobile services. And so I very much support SB 803 if amended, because not only the scope of practice for aesthetics, but also the changing of regulations of the mobile services. I was unable to bring my mobile unit to California because it does not fit the requirement. However, I've been using it in 2 other states for some time. So that is the part that I was most concerned with, as well as updating the scope of practice for estheticians. I feel like this is very important as it will help to elevate our profession and bring it into the new era. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Jennifer Vartarian. Jennifer, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi there, everybody, and thank you for your time. My name is Jennifer Vartanian. I am a licensed esthetician here in California, a small business owner for 26 years. I support SB 803 if it is amended. I support expanding the scope for estheticians, and I support the hairstylist staying licensed. I just find this absurd that we would allow people to cut hair and do things completely out of scope, especially with how strict we have been with COVID guidelines and such. I also want to say that I support mobile units, and I definitely support there being some type of amendment with practical and hours. And I'm really upset for hairstylists. I believe that they need to be supported in this. So I'll leave it at I support SB 803 if things are amended. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Claudia. Claudia, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Claudia Avila. I am a cosmetologist for 27 years. I'm a barber and cosmetology instructor for 15 years. I do support the bill with certain amendments and obviously not removing the hair cutting and the styling out of the curriculum. I do support possibly cutting hours from the cosmetology from 1,600 hours to maybe 1,200 hours. The barbers from 1,500 hours to possibly 1,000 hours. Obviously, eliminating the things that are unnecessary. What I do not support is removing the practical exam from the testing. I do have barbers that have learning disabilities, dyslexia, hard time comprehending the material, short-term memory, and with that written only being taken, I have a lot of failures in that because of those disorders in place. My question is, by you guys removing the practical, a lot of times they nitpick the practical and they don't pass the student by maybe 1 point. I think it's ridiculous. I think they should have leniency in the practical exam as well, but keeping that in place, not just the written. Some students don't understand scenarios because they haven't applied their practical part of it. So it's very difficult for them to understand the scenarios without the practical part of it in general.
30 seconds.
Other than that, I think everything else is, I'm okay with it. And again, hopefully it doesn't pass, or if it does, with some amendments without removing the hair cutting and stuff. I've been a licensed instructor for a long time and a hairdresser, and I think that would be opening a can of worms with so many more infections that I'm seeing already. So thank you for your time, and I hope you take that into consideration.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual identified as Tori Garcia. Tori, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now. Tori, you are unmuted. All right, unfortunately, it doesn't look like Tori's microphone is working. I'm going to mark her down and we'll circle back with her later.
Does that?
Oh, I apologize. I muted you as soon as you came online. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay,
the
wonderful.
Audio was weird.
No worries. Going to start your timer now.
Okay. My name is Victoria Garcia. I'm currently a cosmetology student pending licensure. I'm also a personal assistant to Marta Ortega, who's an instructor with ABC Adult School Beauty Academy. I do want to comment on the taking away the practical exam and then also reducing hours for cosmetology students. I've seen a lot of people more in my generation now going to unregulated stylists or like in unregulated areas, and I'm seeing an uptick in a lot of dissatisfied consumers, people who are extremely angry with their stylist, saying, well, if this was, if they're professional, then they should know how to do this. And I feel like I'm seeing a lot of backlash towards those stylists. And on top of that, with consumers, we are people who sit and we stare at their scalp and we notice a lot of health issues with them. And without the proper training for that, we can't spot them, and that puts the consumer at risk because they're not going to notice a mole on the back of their head if they're covered in hair, and then they can't go to a doctor, and that takes away a huge part of what makes us so important to the community. And then also a previous person commented on unsanitized like implements, and especially with COVID in the past year, I mean, we have seen how people need to fix their sanitary habits, and noticing how important it is to sanitize and prevent infection and sickness, and knowing that we might be taking that off the curriculum, I strongly oppose it. So as well as the reduction of hours, I do see a small reduction in hours, but 500 to me seems too much. Okay, that was.
All right, we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment, Alejandro C. Alejandro, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Alejandro Quadro from Urban Barber College. And my public comment that I wanted to make was that it just doesn't feel like the right time to make any drastic changes in our industry. We've had one of the toughest years in a very long time. And right now, it feels like I've only been open a few months, and it feels like I'm starting a brand new business all over again. We have barber shops that are looking for licensed barbers. They're starting almost brand new businesses because their barbers have moved to other states, moved to cutting in unlicensed mobile units, and it's been quite difficult. And proposing these new changes, cutting hours from 1,500 to 1,000 is pretty drastic. Is almost is more than 30% reduction in requirements. I just don't feel like it's the right time to do that at the moment. And then lowering those requirements to 1,000 hours, our state's reciprocation, we wouldn't be able to transfer our licenses to many other states that have higher standards. Only
30
a few
seconds.
states have changed their hours to 1,000. My time?
You have 12 seconds left.
Okay. Yeah, it just seems like some pretty drastic measures that we don't feel like have had input from people from the industry.
All right, we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Tracy Jackson. Tracy, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can hear me. My name is Tracy Jackson, and I'm a small business owner, and I hire and employ lots of stylists in my organization. I definitely support the reduction of hours as it gets people working more quickly, and I also support the removal of the practical exam because it does not test for safety but for technique, and that's trained at the store level. And also, I think this also impacts a lot of people who are in groups that are, impacted groups like minority and people who don't earn a lot of money. And this gets them to work quicker and allows them to earn a good income for their families. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual, Tiffany Royce. Tiffany, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, I'd like to gain clarification on 7334. Talk about it too much. It states that the pre-apprenticeship will be administered by the board. Does this mean that State Board will be giving the health and safety course? Does this mean that we're going to be having like an online system where people will be able to be taking that course through? So I'd like to gain clarification on that. And then I'm highly opposed to removing the practical examination. I mean, we have huge issues with the passing rate on the written exam. It seems like we're regressing by now, making it all written exam. We haven't yet addressed the issues with the language barriers within the written exam. And when Tracy talked about it, she talked about looking into it. And I mean, I don't think that we should jump into something where the technology is not there yet. Let's talk about that once the technology is there. I think that would be kind of jumping the gun. And the practical does not test on technique. It actually solely tests on those health and safety for the client. So I think that removing the practical would be very bad for the industry. I do agree with maybe reducing the hours. That makes sense, especially after
30 seconds.
Steve talked about the different hours that other practices do. I do think that, reducing the hours is something that we should do. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Jennifer Charm. Jennifer, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, thank you very much. Yes, my name is Jennifer Charm. I am a salon owner. I have been an esthetician for over 29 years, though I started on the cosmetology apprentice side. So I have a little bit of experience on both. I support this bill with the amendments, but you know, my husband's an educator. I've seen the state of education over the last 30 odd some years, and especially with this pandemic. So while my opinion might not be popular, I do not support cutting the practical. I think that what has to happen is the written exam should cover those things, legal issues, safety issues, health issues that would not be demonstrable in a practical exam. But I've trained as a counselor, and I've had to have watched sessions. I don't think that you kill a practical exam. I don't think we dumb down becoming a licensee. I didn't touch someone for almost 2 years when I got my license. I did a ton of post-educational training and I paid for it. So I think that our licenses should be separated out. I support cutting the cosmetology hours and allowing estheticians to be estheticians and cosmetologists to do what they do best, and nail people as well. Everyone can do post-educational training, and I think that that's the way it should be. I think it should be more education, not less. I'm all for opening up California to people working, but I'm not really interested in getting my hair or
30
face
seconds.
services from someone with a 10th grade education who did not have to demonstrate what they did. So I support the bill with amendments, but I also support keeping our industry educated and intelligent.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Ryan. Ryan, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I believe Carrie Bennett, well, first, my name is Ryan. I'm a licensed barber from the state of California. And Carrie Bennett answered my first question about, it was section 12, oh, excuse me, section 6, section 316 about, it says, will remove cutting hair. Especially me being a barber, it's very important because in the barbering industry, one of the biggest impacts right now happening to the communities within the United States and around the world is the fact of foil and electric shavers being used on cutting hair while specializing in fades. So that's like a big issue in our license, and just cutting hair is important in general. But my second question and comment is section 12 and section 7347. It says any person, firm, or corporation desiring to operate an establishment, which is a little confusing. Does that mean any, like, literally like any person? I feel like the wording is a little off. Like it should say any licensed individual in cosmetology or barbering and etc. Because it kind of makes it seem like anybody can own an establishment,
30
like,
seconds.
I don't know, Taco Bell, or so on and so forth. And then section 9, section 7334 about the 16 years of age in 12th grade. I just feel like maturity comes with the skill of each trait, and that should not happen. So thank you for your time and patience very much.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Alex Soto. However, I don't see them in my attendee list anymore, so perhaps they left. I will look for them once we go through all our other comments later. In that case, we will move on to individual identified as Ashley Storm. Ashley, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hello. I just want to express my concerns about this bill. I think that we should be amending it and focusing on having the practical be more of like blood spill concept, focusing on how to mix barbicide, how to do all these things. I think it's vital because a lot of cosmetologists and estheticians and nail techs, they don't even know how to mix cloth. So I think that we still need to be focusing on people like not having this written test only, because it's going to limit the people that want to be in this field. But because most people go into this field because they want to, they're hands-on learners. And I think that we need to be addressing like reclassification of the cosmetologist, but by saying like hairdressers are hairdressers, but if you want to be a cosmetologist, you can be having these programs to learn all the things that you may be interested in, like makeup or esthetician work, things like that. Because I feel like with Aveda especially, people do mini facials. So if you're not having the proper, or you're
30
like limiting the
seconds.
proper things that are going on, then you're limiting the hairstylist and their money. So I think we need to be adjusting that. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual's requested public comment. Individual identified as Mercedes Hong. There she is. All right, Mercedes, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, I'm Mercedes Hong from Spot Apprentice Academy. First, I wanted to thank the board. For me, it's going to be no on the haircutting license. And the reason for that is there's going to be too many loopholes. One, it doesn't stop the person that gets the haircutting license from doing other procedure when nobody's watching. And the consumer as well would not know that they're not licensed to do other procedures other than hairstyling. So for the safety of everyone, and especially the consumer, that's definite no for me. When it comes to for the board teaching the 39-hour course, now this past year with COVID, we saw online teaching. I mean, you could see how it had affected our own students that are in high school right now with grades tumbling. Now we have to remember we are teaching, the requirements are you have to have 10th grade equivalency. And that's kind of what we have. It's between the 10th grade and 12th grade. I don't see how the 39-hour online course would help the students. Right now, it's currently taught in person with live classroom settings, with scenarios and open conversation. And we feel that that works. We don't think that teaching it online would help the student in any way because they get very disinterested. You know, they'll maybe be on their phones doing something else, and the person at the table will be able to see that. So we definitely say no to that. It needs to be taught in person for the safety and knowledge of our students. Thank you very much.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Angela Green. Angela, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Thank you for the time to speak. My name is Angela Green. I've been an esthetician for 17 years now and a licensed manicurist here in the state of California for 19 years. And I do support SB 803 if amended. From an esthetician's perspective, estheticians should have a revision in the scope of practice based on the timelines that were presented earlier. And we are here to meet the needs of our consumers. And that's really why we get these licenses and what we're here to do. Of course, that has to be within guidelines, and which is where our state board holds that's accountable. I do support maintaining standards around disinfection and sanitation. Now more than ever, this is a commitment to the health and safety not only of our clients, but also of ourselves as practitioners working in the environment from day to day. As a national educator for multiple brands and maintaining my aesthetics and manicurist licenses in the state of California, we are significantly limited based on other state practices and also industry advancements as a whole. Amending this bill to include additional services for estheticians would also create opportunities beyond salon and spa work. We certainly want to support advanced training and development beyond the education received in to pass state board exams. And consumers deserve well-trained practitioners in all of these, with all of these services. Solo estheticians as well as small businesses can exercise more specialty services and more options to have highly proficient practitioners to support the needs of the customers who are requesting those
30
services.
seconds.
My time is complete. Thank you for the time.
All right, we will move on to our next individual who's requested public comment. Individual identified as Rachel. Rachel, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hello to the board. I really appreciate you guys putting this together. I've been here since the beginning listening to you all, so I thank you. My name is Rachel Galati. I'm a licensed cosmetologist since 2010. I haven't done a single skincare or nail service since then. I support the expansion of the board for better representation of the different licenses. I support an amendment to SB 803. Do not eliminate practical exams. The consumers need proof of protection from cuts, burns, sanitation, even if they are just shampooing or blow drying. We are working with living human beings, not buildings. I also benefited majorly from pre-application in 2010. Taking practical exams away puts more burden on salon owners focused on technical professional skill training versus babysitting health and safety in their establishment for licensed professionals who took a practical and written exam for too many irrelevant skills they won't use. I do support shorter hour programs if they can separate skincare, nail care from hair care. I personally don't know any hairdressers that do skincare and nails, therefore wasting training hours and time when they can be safely out on the workforce, focusing on hair only, like barbers do. And hopefully shorter courses reduce the cost of training to be more accessible for low income without financial aid options like myself in 2009. Do not remove regulations on hair cutting and only benefits barbers, a majority male-dominated industry that handles straight razors and deals with multiple
30
consumers
seconds.
a day. I believe California has always upheld the highest license standards and have no problem with out-of-state licenses meeting those standards and not just easily coming through after all the training we as Californians have had to do. I do not think comparing our hours to other vocational license programs who should require more hours than us, like cops who hold guns, is a good argument to reduce our training. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual's requested public comment. Individual identified as Kevin Henkel. Kevin, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, thank you. I am a employer within the industry, and I just wanted to voice my support for reducing the amount of hours for the license. I think just with the discussion this morning, you guys are just really on the right track with that. I also believe that the true skill training actually happens more on the job, and I think that supports a more realistic number of hours in training. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Kelly S. Kelly, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Hello, everyone. It's been really nice to listen to this conversation this morning. My name is Kelly Swallow. I'm a licensed esthetician, instructor, and an establishment owner. I have been in the industry for about 13 years. I definitely support the changes, if amended, to support the change in the esthetician scope of practice. I do strongly oppose removing haircutting and styling from licensure. And listening to the conversation today, I'd be interested to know more about what the removing of that practical process looks like. My gut feeling says it's a bad idea, especially coming from an instructor perspective. I think of like driving a car. You know, it's one thing to write about instructions on how to drive a car, but to actually drive the car, it's a bit totally different. So it kind of makes me a little nervous thinking about removing the practical. Just in short, I just believe that we need to focus more on improving and expanding the education in both schools and continuing education, and not deregulating and devaluing our education or our licenses. So thank you so much for your time today.
All right, this is the moderator, and we'll move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as ZH. ZH, I will be unmuting your microphone. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak in a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now. ZH, you are unmuted. All right, it looks like we're not hearing any audio from their mics, so I will circle back with them later, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Omar Manzan. Well, there we are. All right, Omar, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak in a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Hello, how's everybody doing? Hopefully everybody can hear me. My name is Omar Monzon. I'm the owner of Master Academy located in Long Beach, California. I've been a licensed barber for 17 years, 10 years in the education, and 14 years as a barbershop owner. And I just want to just really quickly say, you know, I don't think removing the practical is a good idea. I think changing and, you know, maybe making the practical a little bit better is a great idea, but that can come later on with different changes. But I think we should leave the practical part on there. Also, just the whole deal with just removing hair cutting and hairstyling from the practical for licensing is just a ridiculous idea. It's gonna destroy our industry. It's gonna really make some bad choices. I mean, it's just unsanitary, consumer safety. You know, it's just really gonna make it really bad for our industry. You know, I just think that we need to make sure that we keep that in our industry. That needs to be regulated. There's a lot of bacterial infections, fungus infections. I see ringworm all the time, you know, and this stuff can only be prevented by training people the right way and making sure that, you know, people are getting a haircut from a licensed professional. Haircutting, you know, you can't spread a lot of diseases and a lot of infections and, you know, viruses through the unsanitary equipment. So I think it is very important to make sure that we're regulating that part. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say. You know, but I think the practical should stay, the testing, and I think the
30
you know,
seconds.
maintaining hair cutting and hairstyling as a license is a crucial part of this industry. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. We will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Reed Ryan. Oops. Actually looks like Reed has left. So we will move on to our next individual identified as Leela. Leela, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak in a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now. Hold on, it's not unmuting.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. My name is Lila Castellanos. I'm a small business owner of the past 7 years. I am a licensed California esthetician holder for the past 16 years. And I just wanted to come on here and say that I fully support the SB 803 if it is amended. I do believe that stylists, barbers, they should be licensed to cut hair. My partner is a barber, and he put a lot of time and effort into his schooling and education. And so I believe that, you know, that should definitely still be intact. But as far as estheticians go, we haven't been able to widen our scope in so many years. And there are a lot of things that we would still love to, you know, be able to do. And I just support the bill. Thank you so much.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Mikael Robles. Mikael, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak in a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Yes, Michael Robles here from San Bernardino Cuts Barber Cosmetology Apprenticeship Program. Been licensed for approximately 20 years. Was a first responder for 10 years. I oppose this bill. One of the reasons is mobile units, they don't have requirements that we need to disinfect, which is a CDC puts in requirements for us. So I oppose the bill for that. The other one, which is 7334 on the apprenticeship, removal of the apprenticeship sent over to the state. we didn't get clarification if the state is taking over the 39 hours, who's going to take over the RSI hours that are put in place by the department. And then number two, the apprentices that are currently in schools right now, what are they going to do? There's a cheaper way to get these students to work and get a job without having a higher cost. And the apprenticeship is by far what I've been seeing happening for our students, getting them to work, getting them the required hours that they need to work safely in an environment to make the money that they need to provide for the family. So we didn't get clarification on the 7334 of the state taking over and what's going to happen with the RSI. And then also another one, if the RSI or if the apprenticeship program is given by the state, will the state approved apprenticeship programs now, will they be grandfathered in to be a post-secondary facility to educate the
30
existing
seconds.
apprenticeship programs, or will they be able to get a post-secondary institution without any extra requirements to continue on educating these publics? Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual who has requested public comment, Fernando Lin. Fernando, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody from the board. Thanks for having me on. My name is Fernando Lin. I'm 18-year licensed barber, and I'm also the owner of Learning Institute of Southern California. Been open for about 3 years now. I guess I'm kind of mixed as far as supporting the bill or not. But obviously, listening to you guys, I do agree with some of the amendments needed to take action before trying to get this bill passed. I do not believe that removing haircutting from our scope of practice is the best thing for our industry. I also do support the reduced hours for school, but I do ask how you guys approach that. Might be catastrophic for some schools. I did hear previous speakers talk about that barbers do not specialize in skincare, and I am here to kind of oppose that comment, because here in my school, we do have several barbers that have graduated and have been specialized in skincare. Our scope of practice does allow us to perform certain skincare services as long as they are trained. A lot of people in the public and also in our industry do not know that, but I went ahead and did my research for that, and we do train some of our students to specialize in skincare. So if you were to reduce the hours for, let's say, a barber student, would it be in the best interest to just take away completely all scope of practices that other people just feel that are not in the industry anymore? And as far as mobile units, I feel like that would take away resources that are already not in place for the state board. And as far as the exam, I do not approve taking away the practical examination as part of the testing for our license. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual, Roxana Sanchez. Roxana, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, good afternoon, I believe right now. My name is Roxana Sanchez. I've been a cosmetology and barber teacher for about 30 years, been in the industry for 35 years. I've been through the sunset and through the removal of a teaching license, which have been given a lot of downs to our industry. Now with this bill, I oppose the bill. Although I know that they need some changes, we need to include more than just lashes to the esthetician license. They do a lot of more services than that need to be integrated into their licenses. And I oppose to the removal of the practical test, seeing that most of the students, they do a lot of practical. This is a hands-on career where we need to check the practical. And I also oppose to the removal of the hair cutting and styling from barbering and cosmetology, which is one of the things that we, the students and we as professionals do the most. And that will cut off our license standards and education as well. And also one of the other things that I oppose is to the drastic reduction of hours. That needs to be double check. I understand that students need to be study and take less time to go and work. But the drastic change will diminish also the
30
standards of
seconds.
their education. So in overall, I just oppose the bill. I think we need to recreate another bill with better writing. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Before we move on to our next individual's requested public comment, just as a general reminder, we are not taking serial comments. Additionally, we are going down the list of comments in order received. So please wait patiently while we get through the list. There are a lot of people who have requested comment. And typing in several times is not helpful. So we will now move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Patrick Thompson. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak in a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now. Patrick, you are unmuted.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Patrick Thompson, and I'm the president of the Aveda Institute, Los Angeles. And I want to express my strong opposition to Senate Bill 803. And I want to just cover 4 unintended consequences if the bill is passed in its current form. One is it will foreclose students from pursuing salon ownership directly out of cosmetology school and leave students seeking to open their own businesses unprepared for success in the career. Over the last 10 to 15 years, the number of students deciding to go directly into loft or salon ownership has increased dramatically, and those students need more preparation, including the 3 practices that are included under the current cosmetology license, which is skin, nails, and hair. Second, it will increase the training burden on small businesses already struggling to recover from the devastating impacts of COVID-19, particularly those smaller salons that now have to pick up the additional training hours. Third, it will increase the debt burden on students and reduce the amount of grant dollars available to those most truly in need. The federal Pell Grant, as a result of going from 1,500 to 1,000 hours, will be reduced over $4,000, or from 1,600 to 1,000 hours will be reduced over $4,000. So as a result, the bill is going to benefit those large chain salon corporations and their franchisees instead of the small and independent business operators. I might support a 1,000-hour hairstylist license, but obviously that is not in the bill, and therefore I strongly oppose Senate Bill 803.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Linda Lamb. Linda, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak in a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now. Linda, you are unmuted. All right, it appears Linda's mic might not be working, so we will move on to our next individual. Individual identified as Christy. Christy, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak in a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, my name is Christy. I am an esthetician who has been in the skincare industry in California, in the Bay Area, Arizona, and also in California. And also here in Los Angeles. And I support the SB 803 bill with amendments. It's been well over 40 years since we've had a change to the esthetician license, and it is about time. I understand there's a lot of schools that are making comments, and I just need to remind people that this is also about opportunity for estheticians to really expand our scope of practice, which is long, long overdue. So that's it. Just let us do more work. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. We will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Give me one moment. My list got crazy. Ron Chamberlain. Ron, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak in a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now. Ron, you are unmuted. Oh, I have you logged in 3 times. So let me try another one of the logins. Ron, you are unmuted. Did not work. Ron, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Yeah,
There we go.
I had a little technical problem as I was driving. So, yes, I support SB 803. I've been hoping to have I'm a salon owner, hoping to have the number of hours reduced, which it does call for, hopefully, to 1,000 or so. And this will help get stylists to work in the positions they love. In addition to that, I do support reducing the exam and just having a written exam. I think that the technology will allow us to do that very efficiently moving forward, and we need to do everything we can to have the students getting out of school go ahead and be able to start getting into the hair cutting business. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, this is the moderator. We will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as, a moment. Amanda Ruther. Amanda, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now. Amanda, you are unmuted.
My name's Amanda Ruther. Hi, my name's Amanda Ruther, and I'm a California licensed cosmetologist, and I'm also an establishment owner. I support SB 803 with amendments to the portion of the bill regarding deregulation of haircutting for barbering and cosmetology because I believe it can negatively impact consumer safety. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Melissa Mechikoff. Allison Mechikoff, I apologize. Allison, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, not a problem. Thank you so much. My name is Allison Mechikoff. I am a cosmetology instructor, a licensed cosmetologist, and a licensed barber for the state of California. I oppose SB 803 without modifications. The modifications definitely need to be taken with 7316 with the scope of practice for cosmetologists. If we do remove hair cutting and styling, consumers and licensees, pardon me, will be harmed. I do believe that our standards should remain high. I also oppose removing the pre-application process. Students will have to wait months to take their exams if we do remove the pre-application process. And a lot of the things mentioned within this bill during discussion were getting students in the workforce as quickly as possible. And by removing the pre-application process, we are actually inhibiting our students from entering the workforce. I also oppose 7338. The practical exam
30 seconds
is vital to the success of ESL students and vital to consumer safety as well as the safety of licensed professionals. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Carl Gibbs. Carl, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now. Carl, you are unmuted.
Damn, that sucks. Poor guy.
Carl, you are unmuted. All right, it appears Carl's mic is not working, so we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as, let's see. Amelia Valadez. I do not see an, oh, nope, I don't see an Amelia in here. So we move on to Kelly S. Kelly, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now. Oh, I apologize. We already took Kelly. In that case, we will be going with Dolores. I apologize. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. But Dolores, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm a licensed barber and a licensed cosmetologist. I've been an educator for about 9.5 years. I completely oppose this bill because this deregulates everything. It destroys the industry. And I think we need to save our barbering program. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Alicia Orabella. Alicia, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Alicia Orabella. I'm a licensed cosmetologist in California and a salon owner in Oakland as well, and founder of Pro Beauty Inside. I'm calling in to support Senate Bill 803 as long as it's amended. As a licensed cosmetologist, I believe removing haircutting and styling from the barber Cosmo license is a risky idea. Can they guarantee that it will be done safely? When we refer to consumer protection, where is that protection without licensure? It also greatly reduces the value of what we do and our chosen area of expertise post-beauty school. Where estheticians are concerned, it's definitely long overdue that they deserve a new scope of practice in these additions. Being licensed for 30 years, I've never performed one facial. So on that note, I also support a hairstyling license as well, because having it the way it is right now, being forced to take an esthetician course in which I'm not going to implement, just makes it more lengthy for us to be in school. Lastly, as a seasoned hair industry educator, removing the practical exam is long overdue. I feel that not only are we one of the few states left to still implement this grandfathered in practice, it does not represent simple safety or competency. And if we cannot explain in writing what we are doing, then maybe we shouldn't be doing it. Thank you for your time. I learned a lot today.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual, oh, nope, they're not in the attendee list anymore. So we will move on to Cynthia James. Cynthia, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Thank you. My name is Cynthia James. I'm a longtime licensed cosmetologist, and I work at a community college cosmetology school. I want to say I agree with estheticians being able to do eyelash extensions. With a limited license in haircutting or hairstyling, how will consumers differentiate between full cosmetology licenses versus a limited license? Also, it seems it will be more of a barrier to cosmetologists to parse out licensing instead of preparing them to work fully in the field as they desire. Having to return to school to expand opportunities is also a barrier. The legislature may better serve the industry by investing in students that want to attend school and ensuring schools comply with adequate training standards versus teaching to the test. Students must receive training while in school, working with clients using modern techniques. It was mentioned that on-the-job training occurs once a cosmetologist is in a salon. I disagree. Pre-COVID, the school where I work had a robust simulated salon environment that prepared students to work immediately upon licensure versus putting the onus on salons to teach emerging stylists how to manage client services. Reducing hours may also have a backlash with newly licensed stylists not working in the field, as they feel they are ill-prepared to work independently in a salon if they can't secure a job in a salon with additional training and support. I disagree with eliminating the practical exam. Students can harm a client with a curling iron or a blow dryer, not to mention chemicals.
30 seconds.
Having experts examine procedures for consumer safety and correct application should never be discarded. If we diminish the licensing down, I am concerned with reciprocity in other states. I think that we could bridge the equity gap by offering grants to students, pay students while they are in school, and create pipelines from schools to salon placement. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will circle back with a couple individuals whose microphones were not working earlier. So first we will start with individual identified as ZH. ZH, I will be unmuting your microphone. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you for allowing me to be here, as well as awesome to hear so many amazing people out there in California working together for this. I'm a cosmetologist in California, as well as hold licensure of cosmetology in many other states. I've been teaching cosmetology for over 10 years. I do agree with some of the bills proposed, and I also agree with some of this totally not okay. I think estheticians definitely need to be leveled up because that's something that we've been waiting for. I also practice esthetician work as well as cosmetology. Again, I've worked in states like Oregon where they have fields of practice where you can actually go and get your hours for the field of practice you want to do. I know that confuses licensure. I absolutely do not think it is smart to remove a practical exam from a hands-on industry. I understand changing hours is a good idea to maybe make sure that we can get people in and out. I also have worked in multiple schools, anywhere from mom and pop shops all the way up to Aveda institutes. I think it's completely insane that I got my cosmetology license for less than $10,000, and now I've taught at levels at Aveda where they're charging $40,000. So if we want to think about a licensure, we should actually look at schools and how we're being trained and charging our students properly, because I got a cosmetology license, passed my exam for less than $10,000, and now I teach at a higher standard. So again, there's many things I definitely think we should go for, but the health and safety after just coming out of COVID is completely unacceptable to me. I think we all need to be tested and be safe and make sure that we're being trained for that. I understand cutting out hair cutting would make no sense since that's our industry. So I don't agree with removing more education to get people out quicker. I feel like that's gonna make
30 seconds.
more of a mess in the community, more unhappy people. I think as being an instructor that we absolutely need to focus on education and make sure that people are confident in this field so that we can have a higher standard. Thank you guys so much.
All right, this is the moderator. We will loop back with Linda Lamb. Linda, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, thank you. I'm hearing a lot of interesting comments. I'm with ASAL Beauty College educator and administration officer. I do oppose SB 803 in many ways, but I also do realize that we do need to make some changes. So right quickly, what I have, really thought about was the 1,100-hour hairstylist license, but retaining the cosmetology full license for those who want to do the full scope of practice, give them an option to that. Also, one of the things is I disagree with removing the practical test. I think the practical test is very vital. It is very important that we are, focusing and putting, really good licensed professionals out there in the field. So by eliminating it, that to me poses a danger. Okay. On the other hand, that's primarily what I wanted to say, but I understand that this bill is very crucial, but at the same token, like I have recommended, is to have a 1,100-hour hairstylist license. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the written test. Okay, right quickly, I just want to say that the state board should revamp the test to make it a health and safety test, a communicable disease test, and business administration test, and let the schools just focus on hair
30
coloring, permanent
seconds.
waving, hair cutting test, and hairstyling tests, and remove those from the written test, but keep it more on health and safety, communicable disease, and business administration. Okay, so I really appreciate the time that you've given me, and thank you, everybody. I've been listening to your input, and it's been great listening to everybody.
All right, this is the moderator. We will circle back with Carl Gibbs. Carl, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak in a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now. Carl, you are unmuted. All right, it appears Carl's mic is still not working. And at that point, it looks like we have addressed all the requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right. The Q&A panel is now closed.
Okay. So if we have our board members back, which it looks like we do, we're ready to proceed with the motion. Sabrina, it's been a while. Could you reread the motion for us so we're all completely on the same page?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. So Christy's going to have to chime in because I want to make sure I can read my own writing. So we have a motion and a second to support the bill with our amendments. And our amendments specifically on 7316 about the not removing the scope of practice information there under the Barber and Cosmo. We want to make sure we put in lash extensions for the estheticians, and the esthetician will remain the same as in the bill. And then I believe everything else will be addressed in the normal workings of working through this bill. We have the stylist license would be a new license that would be established through this bill. We have the delegation to the executive officer to work with the legislative staff and other staff to implement the changes and the different requests for clarification and throughout the bill. And I also want to remind everybody, this is not the last time you're going to see this bill. You're going to have this, this is going to come back before you again, and you'll be able to see the changes and anything else that might come of that. Did I get everything, Christy?
Just one addition, that we would request that a sunset date be added for the standard of 4 years.
Ah, yes, sorry.
Okay. That being the case, I think we're ready to vote on our position. And I'd ask our board analysts to do the roll call.
Thank you, members. So we have a vote for the motion. Steve Weeks.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Callie Mae Pham.
Callie Mae Pham, yes.
Jackie Crabtree.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Derek Matos.
Derek Matos, yes.
Tanya Fairley. I did it again.
Tanya Fairley, yes.
All right, you have 5 yes votes. Motion passes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. That will conclude a long morning of business for us and on a complicated bill. So just let me say I'm really proud of all of my colleagues on the board. You did a good job, everyone, today, and we are now adjourned.
Have a good week. Bye-bye.
I'll see you at the next meeting.
I apologize. This is the moderator. I believe we still have one more item on the agenda. I don't know if Sabina was able to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we still have public comment on items not on the agenda.
Oh, you're right.
So that would be, you're right, that would be open for public comment for anything that was not discussed today.
Great. Let's open it then.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comments for items not on the agenda. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda, please click that Q&A icon at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. And please type, I would like to make a public comment and send to all panelists. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. And it looks like we do have a request from individual identified as Rachel. Rachel, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hello, guys. Thank you for hearing this public comment. I just had a question about when we are going to get news on COVID guidelines for the state of California, since the state is opening June 15th. There's a lot of turmoil now with the CDC's report last week that kind of has everyone really confused and not really knowing what to do. So I have no idea if you guys have come up with a plan for our reopening June 15th, since we are still functioning under your original guidelines from last summer when we got guidelines to reopen. So yeah, it'd be great if we got an update on what we could legally do from the state board. So thank you so much.
Hi, this is Christy Underwood. I'll just jump in real quick and state that we are expecting information, and as soon as we have that, we will post that on our Facebook page and our website. Nothing yet, though.
All right, this is the moderator, and we'll move on to our next individual's requested public comment. Individual identified as Tiffany Royce. Tiffany, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now. Tiffany, you are unmuted. All right, it appears Tiffany's mic is not muting or unmuting. So we will circle back and move on to our next individual's requested public comment. Individual identified as Omar Manzan. Omar, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, I just have a quick question. Now that the final vote on this subject took place, what would happen if, let's say, they don't want to come back and work with the changes that you guys are proposing? At that point, would the board still approve it or deny it, or what would happen after that? I just want to know because, I mean, this is going to make a huge impact for all the licensed barbers. And the main thing that we're opposing, and even the board it seems to be opposing, is the removal of haircutting without a license. But what if the persons that are pushing this bill decides to say, hey, you know what? This is one of the main reasons why we even created this bill, because this change is going to benefit a lot of franchises that want to train their own employees, and they're having a hard time getting these licensed barbers to work with those companies. That's one of the main reasons why this law was even created. So what's going to happen if they come back and say, we're not going to work with that, we want to keep that in the law? So then what would be the decision on the board after that? That's it.
All right, this is the moderator. We will circle back with Tiffany. Tiffany, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, thank you so much. I think the board does such a great job, and I appreciate us looking into these topics. I do want to know when can we get clarity in regards to 7334? I was told the panelists couldn't talk about it, so when it is that we can get clarity on that, and that's all.
All right, this is the moderator, and it looks like that is our last individual's requested public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Please do. Thank you.
All right, the Q&A feature is now closed.
All right, and I think now we can officially be adjourned. And thank you for all of your long time and dedication on this. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good
everyone.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.